We find ourselves in a world that has experienced one of the most terrible cataclysms in history. The year is 2035, and before us is the outskirts of Seoul. Exactly 5 years have passed since that very day, August 17th, 2030, when humanity faced a catastrophe. It was then that unidentified monsters began to emerge from mysterious doors, and in a matter of weeks, they spread across the entire planet. The monsters turned out to be so different that anyone could not help but draw a parallel with the invasion of demons into the human world. Since then, humanity has had to endure a monstrous number of changes and trials. But now all hopes are pinned on the main character of this story, a young man named Harvey. He hides on the roof of a skyscraper and listens to a radio broadcast where the presenter asks a colleague why only 40% of humanity has survived so far. This question interests Harvey himself, but after a few moments he hears suspicious sounds that do not bode well. The presenter replies that it's all about the walls, built from reinforced alloys. The colleague agrees, but adds there is one detail that almost everyone misses. He says barriers have their limits, and he advises his partner to look around to avoid false hopes. After all, overcrowding in safe zones inevitably results in a shortage of basic necessities. Meanwhile, Harvey recounts the monsters below and realizes that the numbers match perfectly with the data given to him by a friend named Steven. He immediately raises his binoculars to figure out how best to deal with these opponents. The eye is drawn to a small area. There used to be an ordinary parking lot here. Harvey tenses and braces himself for what's about to happen. It's going to get really hot in here in just a few moments. The prediction comes true. An energetic singularity appears right in the parking lot, attracting the attention of everyone around. The singularity rapidly collapses into a mysterious sphere, which in turn opens a small portal. Harvey stares at him and remembers these anomalies are called sudden portals, and they appear here and there. As the name suggests, the anomaly behaves extremely unstable, and its energy trace immediately begins to glow. Harvey continues to watch and realizes that he knows in advance who exactly will come out of that door. After a few seconds, the portal distorts more than usual, and a warrior emerges. He wears heavy armor that provides unprecedented protection against physical damage. As he passes through space and time, he crosses his arms in front of his face to keep the light from blinding his eyes. A couple of seconds pass, the metal finally cools in the cold air, and the warrior activates the armor. He says that he has finally arrived here after many attempts to return to this dimension. The surprised monsters look ahead and carefully study their future victim, who, it seems to them, will not put up any serious resistance. In an instant, they take off, rapidly closing the distance to the warrior. The young man turns to face the approaching wave and wonders what is going on. Outraged by the fate that clearly awaits him, he asks himself why these creatures are still here. Harvey happily lowers his binoculars and notes that this prediction, fortunately, also came true. Meanwhile, one of the giant monsters tries to crush the human warrior. The protagonist watches and rejoices. The battle is beginning, which means he will have a chance to gain another power. A truly horrific battle unfolds in an abandoned area, causing even dilapidated houses to crack. However, an experienced warrior receives serious damage in just a few minutes of combat. He understands that it will be difficult to deal with high-level monsters and loudly announces the skill Sword Nest. Obeying the master's command, a huge number of energy swords appear in the air, carrying an incredible threat. A moment later, the blades change position in space and turn towards the approaching monsters. The warrior, who has lost an arm, commands his energy weapon to move at incredible speed. Obeying the will of the creator, the swords cut through the air and prepare to pierce the first target. Harvey notes that it usually takes 10 high-level hunters to take down a pack like that, but this guy took care of it on his own in about an hour. The giant monster collapses to the ground. The wounds turned out to be incompatible with the life of such a creature. Harvey continues to observe and notices that only one Class A monster remains, but the danger from it is still extremely high. The creature was red in color with huge horns. Even the top 5 hunters in the world would hardly have been able to deal with it easily. Harvey reflects on how he has never seen this skill in action before and mentally commends the warrior who mastered it in combat. Meanwhile, the monster decides to strike from afar and opens its mouth, forming a funnel of dark energy. The warrior understands that it will be almost impossible to survive this attack, even if he gives it his all. Harvey himself is in excellent spirits. This warrior's strength is about to become his own. The formidable fighter uses energy abilities and soars upward, floating in the air. Gathering the last of his strength, he rushes forward, declaring the ability Ghost Throw. In response, the monster uses Demon Blade, but the hail of blows misses the target. The giant tries to figure out what to do, but it's too late. His own ability turns against him. The warrior finds himself right behind the monster. The demonic sword pierces his heart, and the carcass falls to the ground. An impressed Harvey declares that it was a daring battle that went beyond human capabilities. Then he sees the warrior collapse from exhaustion and realizes it's time to go on stage. As he gets closer, he thinks that everything is turning out exactly as Steven said. Approaching the exhausted fighter, he puts his hand on his shoulder and asks if everything is okay. He remembers, according to Steven's stories, he received this man's strength while trying to save him, which means he has a chance, too. The warrior slowly coughs up blood, realizing that his time is up and he is unlikely to survive. Harvey considers whether to help and remembers that there was no talk of medical assistance. The warrior comes to his senses and asks the protagonist what year it is. Harvey replies that it's August 2035 and tries to understand why this question is even asked. The fighter briefly regains his strength and gets up to avoid looking pathetic. He irritably remarks that he spent 30 years in a parallel dimension, while only 5 have passed in the real world. Harvey tries to calm his temporary partner, advising him not to make any unnecessary movements and just rest. The warrior replies that it is too late, and Harvey mentally agrees, this man will die today. The fighter says things would have turned out differently if he hadn't spent most of his energy opening the door, adding that life has a wicked sense of humor. Harvey looks at his interlocutor with pity, trying to understand what happened to him. Without thinking twice, the warrior turns to Harvey with a request to find his family. With these words, he hands over a photograph of his loved ones and asks them to take care of them. Harvey reluctantly accepts the photo and says he is not in a position to care for anyone else right now. The warrior replies that he is not asking for free and offers his strength in exchange. Harvey feigns genuine surprise. The fighter explains that in order to transfer power, he needs to know the name of the person he is talking to. Harvey understands that in this world engulfed in apocalypse, every opportunity must be seized. The warrior introduces himself as Roger and again asks the protagonist's name. Harvey is momentarily transported back to the time when he was betrayed by his comrades and found himself in an extremely unenviable position. One of the opponents approached him and announced that they had finally met. It happened in 2058. He was unexpectedly found in his own shelter and quickly broken. The enemy warned that there was no point in escaping from here. It wouldn't work anyway. Harvey knew perfectly well that with such wounds, he wouldn't be able to take a step. These wounds were inflicted by brutal blows that instantly burned away almost all the life force in his body. He raised his head and asked his tormentors who had exposed his hiding place and betrayed him. The enemy responded that it was a 16th rank villain named Scott who leaked the data for $1 million. Harvey called Scott a pathetic bastard and promised that he would definitely take revenge on him. The death of his parents, false accusations, prison, disaster, and the death of his family, all of this drove him down this path, but now it no longer matters. His enemies told him it was time for him to die and that he should think about his last words, but Harvey categorically disagreed with this. Somehow, he found a way to rewind his own life and decided to show it to his enemies as the final act. The warriors of light stared in bewilderment at the small stone that Harvey had been clutching in his hand all this time. It looked completely ordinary. He announced that this was the very artifact from the legends, the stone of reversal capable of turning back time. The heroes familiar with the artifact looked at it in shock, unable to believe that such a thing could look so inconspicuous. They rushed forward to stop it, but it was too late. Harvey's body began to emit a glow. Harvey said goodbye to his opponent Jonathan Curtis and said with a smile that they would meet again, in the past. By diving into the temporal anomaly, he hoped to return to the days before the disaster, or at least to the time when his brother and sister were alive. So he ended up here, given another chance to live a decent life. It took him 23 years to get back, and now he is finally in the world of the past. Looking at his interlocutor, he extends his hand and clearly states his name, wanting to obtain unimaginable power. The protagonist is once again in a world on the brink of collapse, destruction, and a monster invasion. But life must go on, and this time he is obliged to protect both himself and his loved ones. Roger shouts a command to activate the system's transfer process, targeting a man named Harvey. A few moments pass, and the asphalt next to them begins to shake violently. The system asks Roger if he agrees to continue, warning that the host will die upon completion, and he answers in the affirmative. The system reports that user Roger has lost his rights to the system, and Harvey has been registered as the new user. In an instant, the boy's body is filled with incredible power, and all of Roger's abilities are transferred to the new owner. The system also notifies that a decision has been made to create a second original and transfer the capacity of the original file. The protagonist's body gradually begins to glow, but the effect quickly wears off. Harvey looks around. All around are tall, lifeless buildings, no sign of movement, no trace of monsters. The system reports that the scan of user Harvey's body is complete and the transfer procedure is 20% complete. It is specified that the transfer has already started, but if you are not careful, it can be very easily interrupted. Harvey asks his partner what he meant, completely unaware that the huge monster behind him has risen to its feet. A few seconds later, a heavy, rumbling sound reaches his ears, and he realizes that he is in big trouble. Roger laughs and says that life really is complicated, while Harvey takes decisive action. The giant monster, despite its severe wounds, acts as if it had just emerged from a portal. Roger sadly notes that only the heroes of science fiction novels return home alive and happy. Without thinking twice, he turns to the protagonist and advises him to forget about transferring power and just run before it's too late. He adds that this is all very sad, but they have no choice. And he concludes, if life is total garbage, you have to put up with it, and the only way to survive is to adapt. Harvey refuses to give in to persuasion and picks up a metal pipe, which causes genuine surprise in the experienced warrior. Roger asks if he even understands what he's doing, and Harvey replies that he's perfectly aware of his actions. He then looks at the approaching demon and states that he has been running from it all his life. But now, everything will change. The monster takes a few more steps forward, but Harvey's resolve remains absolutely unwavering, even in the face of such a superior opponent. For some unknown reason, the monster suddenly turns around and walks away, seeming to have completely lost interest in the two fighters. Harvey throws down the homemade weapon and admits that he felt like he was going to die from the sheer exertion. Roger says they were extremely lucky, but Harvey is sure it was all thanks to their own efforts in an unequal fight. In his opinion, even if the monster had not been so seriously wounded, it would still have risked attacking without fear of the consequences. He immediately notices that irreversible changes have begun in Roger's body, but the warrior only repeats, "Find my family and take care of them." Then he points his finger at him and warns, "If you break my promise, I will not forgive you even after death." The system reports that the transfer is 100% complete, but the user's body is deemed unfit to receive the system. The system then decides to restore the host's body through awakening. She warns that the procedure may be painful, and within seconds, Harvey is overcome with incredible pain. These attacks can be described as precise shots from a large caliber weapon directly into the body. Harvey tries to endure it, but the pain quickly reaches levels he never imagined. It seems to him that the bones are breaking one after another, and the flesh is simply crumbling. The sensation is comparable to being burned alive, only the pain is so intense that he can't even scream. Time passes. Morning comes, and another person appears in this place, deciding to try his luck. He calmly drives his car through the ruins and sings songs to keep his psyche in a more or less healthy state. Soon he notices the main character ahead and slows down. He certainly didn't expect to see him here. By this point, Harvey had already securely fastened the loot in the back of the truck so that nothing would fall out along the way. Hearing an approaching engine, he turns around to see who has arrived at such an hour. It turns out that this is an acquaintance of his named Henry, and Harvey greets him quite politely, asking what he is doing here. Henry replies that Harvey was supposed to have the day off today. He was the one who asked to switch shifts, which is why Henry came. Harvey explains how he was going to go back, but a monster appeared on the way, and he was trapped in this place. He adds that he missed the opportunity to retreat and spent the whole night here. Henry responds emotionally that he seems tired of living. Harvey reassures his friend that his decision has earned him quite a large sum of money. He also asks why Henry has arrived at such a time, noting that the rest of the team is nowhere to be seen. Henry evades the answer, citing the fact that he has recently started waking up very early. Harvey smiles and says that everything is clearer now, deciding to himself that this is a lie and there is something important behind it. Henry decides to share a short story, retelling the words of one of his colleagues. Meanwhile, Harvey remembers Steven, the leader of the hyena team and the original possessor of the Spearmaster ability he stole today. He never managed to properly use it, which is why he gradually became an outcast among the awakened until he was found dead in an abandoned building. The reason for his fall was extremely simple, although from the outside it looked like a mystery. In fact, he revealed his copying ability right when he registered the awakened one and instantly made enemies. No one wanted to accept the fact that their skills would be easily copied at the first opportunity. Harvey drives slowly, not bothering anyone, and turns his gaze to the next seat where the valuable loot lies. The set includes 3 Class B crystals and 4 Class C crystals. He thinks that he feels a little bad about this theft in front of Steven, of course, but he risked his life for them. Now, the main thing is to figure out how to sell them. If he sold them all at once, he could calmly retire, but he can't afford that. From Steven's stories, he remembers waking up with Roger's powers, his friend was completely stunned. He said he was so lost that he didn't even take the valuable trophies. And when he came to his senses and returned for them the next day, the prey had already evaporated. Every time he recalled that moment, Steven regretted that he had not taken care of the trophies in time. That's why Harvey planned ahead to collect all the crystals left in the area after the monsters died. The loot was impressive, giving the protagonist a chance to seriously upgrade his skills. He understands that ordinary monster cores can be sold unnoticed, but crystals of this quality will immediately create problems on the market. These issues will draw the attention of the Awakened Association and the government, who will demand an explanation for the origin of the treasures. At best, he won't get even half the real price. At worst, he himself will end up in the government's crosshairs. To avoid repeating the fate of his future friend, who is destined to disappear into obscurity, Harvey decides there is only one way out. According to his calculations, he needs to register as soon as possible, while he is conscious and in his right mind. Having reached the place, he hears from his interlocutor a question. What do they owe to such a busy person? Harvey greets his friend Danny and tells him that he finally got some money and decided to have a drink with him. Danny replies that he wouldn't mind having lunch, but Harvey points out that the gift still needs to be earned. After some time, the action moves to the safe zone of Seoul, where all civilized life in South Korea is concentrated. Harvey stops at a humble merchant's shop and asks how much he will give for his catch. The merchant admits that the goods are truly useful this time and offers $600 for everything. Harvey asks for a raise, since it's hard to find anything worthwhile these days. The seller replies that they used to offer up to $800 for something like this, but now it's difficult. There are significantly fewer people willing to buy expensive goods. Harvey looks at his interlocutor with regret and realizes that he will have to find another way to earn money. The merchant continues to explain the reasons. The population is declining, prices are rising, and people have simply stopped spending money. After some time, a boy and a girl, his younger brother and sister, run up to him. They immediately hang on to him and begin to get indignant. He returned so late that they had time to think that he had abandoned them. Harvey turns sharply to his brother and sister and stares at them. He calms them down and then asks a very important question that leaves the children in shock. Harvey tells them straight out that they should be at school, not hanging around the streets waiting for him to return. The merchant pulls him up. You can't scold the children for coming. They were afraid all night that he wouldn't return. He also advises Harvey to be more responsible and think carefully about what will happen to these children if one day he doesn't come home. Harvey asks his brother and sister why they are crying so hard. The children quickly wipe away their tears and insist that they just had a bad dream, and their older brother calls them home to fry some meat. The children immediately calm down and happily declare that they also love meat. The younger sister remembers that she wanted to tell him something important. It turns out that his grandmother, the owner of their home, asked him to come see her as soon as he returned, and Harvey realizes that he has more work to do today. He asks the reason, and his sister replies, "Grandma told me to tell her that the rent is overdue." Harvey goes home with a heavy head, realizing that an extremely unpleasant conversation with the owner of the apartment lies ahead. Having stopped at the supermarket on the way, he goes up to his grandmother on the 6th floor. As an apology and an attempt to appease the hostess, he brought an impressive quantity of meat delicacies. The grandson of the grandmother who owns Harvey's apartment was also invited to this delicious dinner. Grandma slowly pushes the food aside and asks why he brought so much. Harvey replies that he went to the butcher's shop to buy meat and at the same time remembered about her. Grandma grumbles that such expenses are unnecessary. Food supplies should be stocked up for the children, not for her. Harvey apologizes for the delay and hands over an envelope with rent money. Grandma notices that Harvey's life has become really hard lately and adds that it shouldn't be that way. Harvey looks at his owner in surprise and assures her that he doesn't need help. He'll make do with what he has. But Grandma stands her ground. In difficult times, everyone should help each other out, so she shouldn't be shy and just accept help. She immediately hits her grandson on the head with a spoon, reminding him that this is not his house and that it is not his place to be in charge here. The guy asks if she really plans to smash skulls with a spoon and adds that after her death, the house will still go to him. Grandma replies that she shouldn't have said such things and reminds him that because of him, her stomach hurts and she can't sleep at night. She begins to scold him for not studying, but hanging around doing nothing, doing nonsense, which she calls being a gatekeeper. The grandmother asks what this has given him, and the grandson replies that he is studying how hunters fight in case he himself awakens one day. He reminds us that now is the era of awakening and hunters, and notes that the grandmother does not understand at all how the current world works. The grandmother sighs and turns to Harvey with a request to reason with her grandson. She adds that this guy is the only relative she has left, but he clearly lacks intelligence. Standing on the balcony, Harvey receives a call from Danny. He spoke with the team captain and got him an interview. Harvey happily thanks him for the news, but Danny immediately clarifies that the service will not be free. According to him, instead of an entry fee, Harvey will have to prove his worth in practice. Then he will be taken on as a permanent member of the team in a supporting role. Danny admits that he is surprised by such enthusiasm. Before, his friend had never been eager to work as a porter. Harvey decides not to reveal the real reasons and explains that working in the city has become more difficult, so he is looking for other options. Danny says that the departure is tomorrow around 8 in the morning, and we need to be at exit 7, after which he hangs up. Harvey looks around and notes to himself that so far everything is going according to a carefully laid out plan. The next day, he comes to the gate, where he expects to find the rest of the team. Harvey figures that today he needs to learn the tank's skills and immediately head to the association to win his place in the sun. Danny arrives at the scene, looks at his partner with a smile, and notices that he has arrived earlier than ever. Harvey greets his friend and mentally returns to the plan to enlist in the tanks and receive basic equipment. Meanwhile, Danny approaches the fighter of the required class and announces that this is the very man they talked about yesterday. Tank introduces himself as the team captain Stanford and, citing his age, suggests switching to informal terms with Harvey. Harvey replies that since Danny calls him senior, this automatically applies to him as well and expresses hope for fruitful cooperation. Stanford gives the new recruit a friendly handshake, showing that the feeling is mutual, and in doing so, passes on a copy of his skills. Harvey eagerly awaits the system notification to find out exactly what he copied. The system introduces 3 tank class abilities, the first of which is Iron Skin, which increases defense and absorbs damage. The second, Strike, allows you to hit the enemy with your shield, drawing their attention and raising their aggression factor by 95%. The last skill copied is Pressure, a powerful aura that intimidates enemies and attracts their attention. Harvey's eyes begin to sparkle at the range of possibilities opening up before him. The system also adds a separate menu for viewing all copied skills. Harvey confirms, mission accomplished, survival kit received. Meanwhile, Stanford looks at the guy with bewilderment, who is acting rather strangely and is still squeezing his hand. Danny breaks the awkward silence by asking Harvey if he's okay. Harvey turns around in surprise, and his friend explains he has a very strange smile when he shakes hands. Stanford notes that the guy has a strong grip and doesn't forget to praise his new teammate's physical fitness. Harvey removes his hand and apologizes for his strange behavior, but the captain replies that such a small thing is not worth paying attention to. He immediately nods towards the truck and says that we can load up and go. Harvey takes a closer look at the new team, and the first thing he notices are 2 guys chatting enthusiastically about something else. Next, he sees a man and a girl who, judging by their appearance and equipment, are clearly archers trained for long-range combat. Finally, his gaze catches hold of 2 more fighters, whose role at first remains completely unclear to him. Stanford invites Harvey to say hello to the team and get to know each other a little before heading out on the hunt. Harvey understands that once he begins to copy the abilities of higher-ranking Awakened, everything he has learned today will become worthless. But for now, this is a pretty useful temporary support, even if it negates the skills taken from these people. Having met his comrades, he climbs into the truck, and it immediately sets off towards the hunting grounds. Harvey notes that he managed to master 13 skills in one trip. The first thing he did was to drag 3 healer-class skills into his arsenal. This specialization belonged to one of the girls, who at that moment was chewing gum and glued to her smartphone. Immediately after that, he looked back and figured that he had also removed the cartographer's skills and a couple more on top. He also noted that he copied several attacking techniques that made him an absolutely versatile fighter. Harvey reflected on the incredible possibilities this ability opened up, and he realized that even this was far from the limit. He smiled as he realized he was now pulling the roles of tank, attacker, healer, cartographer, and taker. In his opinion, such versatility is unprecedented. Without the ability to copy it, no one can achieve it. After some time, the squad reached abandoned neighborhoods teeming with dangerous mutants. They didn't keep us waiting and immediately rushed out of their shelters to attack the transport. Stanford jumped out of the car, rushed forward, and carried out an attack maneuver to slow down the relatively weak opponents. He immediately called out to an archer named Christopher and told him to work from a distance. Christopher immediately jumped up, reporting that he understood the order and would now take the necessary position. It took him only a few seconds to do this, and he was ready to open fire. The first shot was immediately followed by several more, and the victim was seriously injured. Stanford continued to give instructions, this time asking the second archer, Lily, to put the finishing touches. The girl took careful aim, and having accepted the commander's order, began to prepare to fire. She calculated the wind speed and tension, and then released the arrow with maximum precision. The lethal force of the shot was unimaginable. The arrow instantly tore a huge chunk out of the unsuspecting mutant's head. Stanford praised the archer for her excellent work and reminded her that there were only 2 mutants left. Harvey decided that he had nothing better to do anyway and thought about leveling up some skill, at least for the sake of interest. However, after weighing everything, he abandoned this idea. After activation, it is impossible to change the role for the next 24 hours. Time passed, and through coordinated action, the experienced squad cleared out an impressive number of monsters from the area. Stanford was pleased to note another quiet day and praised the team's work. Looking at Harvey, he noted his very high endurance and added that there were unusually many trophies today. Then he turned his gaze to the second porter, who had been struggling all this time to keep up with the others. Unlike Harvey, he did not have developed physical abilities, so every step was taken with great difficulty. Danny noted that the guy at school was quite famous for fistfights, a reference to Harvey. Stanford turned to his interlocutor and asked whether he was talking about the time before the disaster. Danny replied that he had a great sense of such people and pointed out that Harvey didn't even train properly, but he still outperformed the athletes. Stanford took a closer look at Harvey and noticed that he didn't look like a bully at all. Danny added that calling him a bandit would be an overstatement. It was the attackers who were afraid of him, and Harvey himself dreamed of becoming a detective. After finishing the job, Stanford announced that everyone had done a great job and handed the protagonist an envelope with money. Harvey started to refuse, saying he couldn't charge for something like that, but Stanford insisted, just take it and say thank you. The captain also noted that it was difficult for a newcomer and asked if Harvey had thought about continuing the collaboration. He hinted that he could help with the work, and Harvey promised to think about the offer. After this, the warrior in heavy armor turned around and, waving goodbye, said that if the opportunity arose, they would definitely meet again. Danny asked his friend if he would be willing to provide the promised help, but was told that he had other plans at the moment. A friend asked what his plans were, but Harvey snapped that he couldn't talk about all his activities. Without thinking twice, he headed to the Soul branch of the Awakened Association to finally register. He soon noticed a sign. There was a separate stand here exclusively for tanks. After making sure he had come to the right place, Harvey approached the bored girl, who looked at him in surprise. After a few seconds, she asked him again what he had just said, and Harvey repeated he had come to register as an awakened one. The girl explained that the stand was only intended for testing tanks, and asked if he was sure that he had awakened in that particular class. Harvey assured that his instincts had not failed him. Today he woke up as a tank. The girl stared intently at the main character, trying to figure out whether this self-confident guy was pulling her leg. Harvey looked back calmly and asked if anything bad had happened. The girl replied that everything was fine and added he was the first person in the last 6 months to wake up as a tank. She then congratulated him and asked if he had brought his ID with him and received an affirmative answer. Without thinking twice, he takes out a document from his pocket that looks like an identity card and hands it to the girl. The employee takes the papers and advises Harvey to sit down on the bench and wait a bit. The protagonist follows the advice and sits down, plunging into dark thoughts. He understands that he will have a hard time in this world. When he first opened his eyes, it seemed to him that it was a dream. But it all turned out not to be a dream, but a cruel reality in which they now have to survive. He remembers the times when he was in prison and how his brother and sister would come to him to cheer him up a little. He also remembers the unbearable pain that tore his heart apart the moment he learned of their death in a car accident. The death of his brother and sister became the turning point after which he chose the path of villainy and crime. But when he returned and saw his family alive, he experienced incomparable joy. The joy was so fantastic that at first it seriously seemed to him as if he were sleeping. He returns to reality and understands. Now, he will not lose his loved ones under any circumstances. He firmly promises himself that he will protect them from any danger that may arise in the future. To adjust his plan of action, he quickly opens the system window. Having studied the indicators, he sees that the resistance is maintained in the range of 6 to 15,000, and the power is generated randomly, from 2 to 5,000. He also understands that his own numbers are the ceiling for the first awakening, and this is a great start. The system notifies the protagonist about the beginning of the core formation process, which leaves him at a loss. He doesn't remember his friend mentioning such a procedure and decides to simply wait for it to complete. After a while, the employee who took his ID appears from the corridor. She calls him by name to get his attention and get him off the bench. She hands the document back, saying that you can take it and not worry about anything. At the same time, it reports that the identity check has been completed and no violations have been found. Immediately after this, she points to the research assistant and asks him to take Harvey for a full examination. The employee introduces himself as Boris and adds that he is very pleased to meet him. Harvey shakes the outstretched hand and replies that he is also pleased to meet you. A handshake seals good intentions, after which they decide to get down to business. Boris says that everything is prepared in advance, so testing can begin right now and without wasting time. They enter the elevator to go up to the desired floor. Harvey figures that the employee isn't awakened, meaning it won't be possible to copy his skills. He notes that he was initially convinced that only awakened people worked in the association, but as it turns out, there are plenty of ordinary employees here too. The situation seems a little unexpected to him, but he decides to go with the flow and just take the test. Soon, he lies down in a chair. A bunch of cables are connected to him, and Boris explains that the test consists of 3 stages. The researcher clarifies. At the first stage, strength and endurance are measured to determine the physical parameters of the subject. After a few seconds, the device informs you that preparation is complete and you can begin taking measurements. Harvey lies quietly in his chair while the science team does their work. No movement, no effort. Boris says the test will last about 10 minutes so you can relax. After completing the first stage, Boris reveals that the second stage requires a unique active ability called Lucky Tom. A small goblin figurine appears in front of Harvey, a dummy for testing the abilities of the awakened. All this time, the main character is closely observed by scientific staff, recording every action. Boris explains that they will also measure aggression levels, and Harvey simply needs to apply his skills on the dummy in front of him. Harvey raises his shield and takes aim, preparing to attack. Boris clarifies that you can hit any part of the doll and advises not to be shy. Harvey takes note and delivers a powerful blow straight to the goblin's ear. The result is so monstrous that Boris and his colleague are speechless. After some time, the tests end, and Boris and Harvey go to get him some coffee. A freshly brewed strong drink steams pleasantly in a bright white cup. Scientists report that due to problems with selecting experts, the third stage of testing will not take place for several days. Harvey asks if the work is finished for the day, and Boris replies that all tests are fully completed. He advises to go to a small counter where Harvey will be given the necessary equipment. Harvey finds it hard to believe that the day has finally arrived when he will receive the association's standard equipment. Boris admits that he is concerned about the decline in the number of awakened tanks and healers. 5 years ago, there were significantly more of them. Harvey takes a sip of strong coffee and considers what he has heard. Boris sits down next to him and explains. The awakened, created with the help of the awakening stones, are filling the ranks, but there are almost no tanks among them. He adds that the stones themselves are difficult to obtain, and special stones for tanks and healers are incredibly rare. Harvey mentally continues his interlocutor's thought. Even with the stone, there is no 100% guarantee of awakening. In his past life, he was lucky enough to obtain the stone and awaken, but then he was declared a villain and lost the opportunity to register forever. Boris falls silent for a moment and then apologizes. He hasn't seen a tank for a long time, so he started talking. Harvey rises carefully from the table and assures him that there is nothing awkward about it. Boris reminds us that we are talking about third grade, so we need to show up on the appointed day and be no more than an hour late to avoid problems. He extends his hand again and says that the exact time will be sent by message tomorrow. Harvey looks at the outstretched palm in surprise, processing what he just heard. After a few moments, a genuine smile appears on his face. He shakes his interlocutor's hand and says that he looks forward to working together. Night falls and Harvey arrives in another area, looking around to be sure. After making sure there is no one suspicious nearby, he calmly walks down the street carrying his equipment in suitcases. The suitcase, which clearly contains a shield, weighs down my hand with a pleasant weight. After a while, he takes out his phone, calls his friend Danny, and asks if it's convenient for him to talk. Danny replies that he'd be happy to chat, and hears that, on the way home, Harvey woke up like a tank. The news greatly surprises his friend, and he asks if they are playing a joke on him. Harvey pauses for a moment to give his answer more weight. After a suitable pause, he says that even if he wanted to, he wouldn't joke about such topics. Taking a few steps towards the right door, he slowly opens it, and the bell screwed on top rings. Looking around again, he notes to himself that he has arrived exactly where he intended to. Harvey maintains maximum concentration while his friend continues to chatter about his own. Danny is indignant. They broke up just a couple of hours ago and Harvey is already a tank. This happens extremely rarely. After a while, he realizes that the other person isn't responding in any way and decides that the call was dropped. Meanwhile, Harvey looks at the small figure of a creepy, bloodthirsty monster. Taking a closer look, he discovers an exorbitant price tag and wonders who would pay that kind of money for such junk. Emerging from his thoughts, he assures his friend that the connection was lost for a short time and reports that he went to the association and checked in as awakened. He also says that he has a test to become a rank 3 tank in 2 days and suggests that watching experienced hunters on the hunt helped him. He also asks Danny if he would like to go as a porter, and he replies that it is time for him to look at something. Harvey admits he was too busy hauling gear to really pay attention to his commander's actions. After some time, he takes the phone away from his ear. The desired object has finally been found. This is a rather simple wooden ring, which at first glance does not seem to have any value. After finishing the conversation, he approaches the seller and says that he would like to buy a bracelet and a bottle of solution. Looking at the artifact, he remembers that it once belonged to Jaden Russell, who was ranked 3rd on the list of villains. At this point, he falls into memories of how he used to have occasional conversations with this notorious scoundrel. He remembers that back then, before the time travel, he himself was only ranked 8th among the villains. He also remembers how they were drinking, and on one of those evenings, Jaden told him where he got the bracelet and what it was capable of. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper looks at the protagonist with obvious suspicion, trying to understand his plan. Harvey notes that the bracelet increases the skill's effectiveness by 30% and asks the seller what happened. The seller remains silent, staring at the guy, and then he can't take it anymore and asks why he's staring at him like that. The unperturbed salesman apologizes for the question and asks if Harvey registered as an awakened one today. Harvey replies that that's exactly it, and at that very moment, the man swings and hits with all his might. Taken aback, Harvey tries to raise his hand in defense, but the fist suddenly freezes a decent distance away from him. The seller says he knew it and then announces that he too has awakened and has teleportation powers. Harvey looks at his interlocutor with slight surprise and notices that the skill is quite interesting. Without thinking twice, he decides to bump fists with him, figuring that teleportation would be very useful to him. The second salesman also extends his fist, introduces himself as Chester, and declares his spatial abilities. Harvey looks at him with pleasure, realizing that this skill will also prove extremely useful. One of the sellers admits to overhearing Harvey's recent conversation and adds that he looks like a tank. He immediately notices that fighters of this class are practically aristocrats among the awakened. Harvey admits that he never expected to meet the awakened here and asks why they are working in the shop. Both sellers respond at once that this place is their main source of income. Harvey asks again if they are serious and hears that it is quite difficult to find a job with auxiliary skills. To support himself and his family, Chester opened shops where he sells antiques and accessories for the awakened. Harvey suggests that these honest workers are also experiencing hard times in the labor market. One of the sellers gives the protagonist the ordered solution, and he responds with sincere gratitude. He takes his purchases, realizing that he has collected all the materials to release the artifact's full power. Having mixed absolutely all the necessary ingredients, he receives an activated artifact that will greatly help him out in difficult battles. Looking at the pulsating device, Harvey smiles happily. His chances of winning have increased many times over. The system notifies that he is holding a rank 38 artifact created by the owner of the original system. She also reports that the Twilight Bracelet is registered as an installed device, and there are currently 16 of them. Harvey reads further and discovers that the 24-hour bracelet is linked to the user of the second source system and is now fully unlocked. He is especially struck by the line that only 101 artifacts of the original system's owner were created. After a while, the phone vibrates loudly. Danny is calling. He admits that the story with the sharp cry scared him a little and decides to go up to say hello to the bird. Picking up the phone, he immediately greets his friend, waiting for fresh news. Danny says it took quite a while to explain the situation to the commander. He adds that all attempts have failed. The unit commanders consider this nonsense and empty chatter. Harvey listens to his friend and learns that the commander will only believe it when he sees it with his own eyes. Harvey states that this is easily fixed and moves on to discuss the system. Immediately after this, he creates a spatial anomaly, and Danny is supposed to meet them at the 7th gate in the morning. Harvey gets to the anomaly, and his friend is still trying to figure out if he forgot the way. Harvey replies that he understands everything perfectly and will be there on time. He says goodbye to his friend and clutches the shiny suitcase even tighter in his hand. Morning comes, and the action moves to the 7th gate of a small town. Harvey approaches the team and greets them sincerely to endear himself to them even more. Stanford and Danny look at their porter in shock. He has some excellent equipment from somewhere. It's worth admitting, honestly, Harvey has a good team. With them, he will last much longer. Danny looks at his friend in surprise and says that the new outfit suits him very well. Stanford admits he is now ready to believe the astonishing fact Harvey really did wake up as a tank. He adds that Danny outlined the situation in general terms, but it is still hard to believe that it all happened in one day. Harvey laughs and says he doesn't understand how it happened. He woke up yesterday on the way home. Stanford smiles at the recent decline in revivals, noting that such incidents restore his faith in the future. Harvey reports that tomorrow he has a test for a third-ranked tank, and therefore he came to Stanford to gain command experience and combat practice. Scratching his chin thoughtfully, he replies that he's not sure if he can teach anything, but he still won't abandon a person in trouble. He lifts his shield slightly and says that he can only give one piece of advice, as the one who started earlier. He then asks if Harvey knows why he needs this shield at all, and is told that he doesn't because he woke up as a tank suddenly. Stanford replies that he holds the shield only because it was his own choice. He adds, in battles with monsters, there will inevitably come a moment when your strength runs out completely. Looking at a promising newcomer, he says that it won't be skills or beautiful presentation points that will bring him back into the fold. From the perspective of an experienced tanker, the foundation of survival and success of any operation is determination. After hearing this philosophy, the team moves into the destroyed area. Over a fairly large area, they discover a sleeping giant bear, covered in scales like those of armadillos. Stanford peers around the corner cautiously and asks the team if they have identified the prey species and its exact location. The team responds that the order has been carried out and confirms the presence of another drone in the area. Hearing this, Stanford asks cartographer Jacob to double-check the monster's location. The guy immediately replies that he understood the commander's order. He calls up an interactive map to mark the enemy's exact position and adjust his comrades' attacks. Stanford carefully studies the map and announces that the monster types have been confirmed and marked. He adds that the 2 red dots are F-class monsters, so-called drones, with low attack power. According to him, they have no mobility, but in return, the protection is very reliable. Danny notes that the most complex orders can turn into a serious challenge, and there may simply not be enough strength to handle them. The team's porter complains that he is already exhausted, although the hunt has not yet begun, and asks how long it will take to break through the defense. Another fighter in the squad notes that at such a distance, even if something happens, the workers do not pose a serious threat. Stanford agrees, but points out that prey moves slowly, and the second group of hunters is one of the most experienced and honored in the area. The healer adds that if the stronger team has a weak attack, she will have an easy day, which cannot be said about the attackers. At the end of the briefing, Stanford asks Danny if he has set up traps and hears that all preparations are complete. He turns around, says he's glad to hear it, and orders Danny and Christopher to follow him and Harvey and Charlotte to stay here. Harvey calmly confirms that he understood the order and begins to look around to avoid an ambush. As Harvey approaches the monster, he finds himself having a very bad feeling about this expedition. He recalls that, judging by the scant details, Danny's team was destroyed by the invasion of an alien monster. He notes that if that monster had been alone against the entire team, they would have easily dealt with it, but for some reason, everyone died. Sensing that something is wrong here, he looks around tensely, searching for the creature waiting in ambush. The deathly silence around continues to confuse the protagonist. He must not let his guard down. Once he's close enough to the monster, he turns to Lily and asks if she's ready to shoot. The girl briefly confirms, and the captain commands, "Shoot right now." Having received permission, the experienced archer immediately releases the bowstring, and the arrow flies forward. It quickly becomes clear that one arrow is not enough to penetrate such protection. This turn of events slightly surprises the girl, and she lowers her bow in irritation. She immediately says that you need to change your position so that the shot goes better. However, even with minimal damage, such an attack is capable of waking up even the strongest. The formidable creature rises to its feet and looks menacingly at the strangers who dared to disturb its peace. Realizing that the monster is about to attack, Stanford commands the attackers to prepare for battle. Danny and Christopher respond in unison that the commander's order has been heard. The giant pushes off the ground with its hind legs to look even more terrifying and put its opponents to flight. Christopher instantly raises his bow and fires several quick shots at the clumsy bear, an easy target. At short range, the penetrating power of arrows is better preserved. They simply do not have time to lose speed. This time, the monster is overcome with incredible pain and it lets out a loud roar, alerting the entire area of the battle that has begun. Christopher is pleased with the success and states that these shots should weaken the target. He immediately jumps up, announcing that he is immediately changing his position, but Stanford replies that he was hasty. The enraged bear rushes forward to deal with the annoying offender who has caused him so much trouble. Christopher replies that he doesn't want to mess with the bear at all. He would prefer to finish it quickly and go home. The next moment, he releases 3 arrows, which pierce the bear's paw, but have no noticeable effect. Trying to get Christopher, the bear makes several quick strikes with its paws, but the archer somehow miraculously dodges. Stanford asks his comrade to stop letting the team down, and he cheekily replies that the bear is too slow and won't hit the target anyway. However, he doesn't have time to finish the sentence. His answer clearly demonstrates why celebrating success in advance is a very bad habit. The blow doesn't hit Christopher directly, but it creates a monstrous shockwave that sends the arrogant archer flying backwards. Before he could recover from his wounds, the archer flew backwards into a brick wall at great speed. Danny turns to his partner and screams loudly, hoping that he survived the blow. Stanford points out that damned Christopher provoked the bear and the inevitable attack, and Danny replies that now they'll have to engage in battle. Seizing the right moment, he easily soars into the air and takes out a dagger whose power is much greater than that of ordinary arrows. However, the drone's defenses prove too strong. The dagger cannot penetrate the incredibly strong scales. But this makes the bear even angrier, and his eyes begin to glow brighter. Danny says, with irritation in his voice, that the armor of this creature is monstrously strong and extremely difficult to penetrate. Meanwhile, the bear decides to ignore the blows from behind and turns towards the defenseless Christopher. He immediately rushes forward, closing the distance to his intended victim. Unable to escape a terrible death, Christopher only manages to cover himself with his hands. Luckily for the budding archer, he has a great team, and one that includes an experienced tank who knows when to step in. Using all his unstoppable power, Stanford lunges and slams his shield straight into the opponent's head, stopping the attack. The heavy armor, which gives the body incredible strength, together with the force of the blow, do their job. The huge drone falls to the ground. However, Stanford understands that it is too early to celebrate and again goes into a defensive stance, preparing to repel new attacks. The dead space around the heroes begins to come alive with the loud roar of a drone spreading throughout the area. The bear quickly rises up on its hind legs and looks menacingly at the offender, realizing that it will have to change its target. Stanford shouts to Danny and Christopher that he is taking the provocation upon himself and they must not miss the moment. Once at the right distance, the experienced tank decides to use its suppression ability and deprive the enemy of any chance. As soon as he activates it, a powerful aura flares up around him, attracting the attention of monsters and driving their aggression to the limit. The drone inevitably enters the zone of action and immediately fixes its gaze on the tank, grinning ominously. Stanford realizes that the plan worked and the enemy was drawn into his control. The bear goes on the attack again to deal with the insolent ones who dared to disturb his precious sleep. Stanford once again anticipates the clumsy beast's attack and raises his shield, completely covering his body. Immediately after this, he counterattacks to briefly stun the enemy and make them vulnerable to allies. Christopher instantly spots a convenient window and shouts to his ally that they need to act immediately. Lily replies that she is accepted, takes out the arrow again, and pulls the bowstring properly. Quickly aiming at the bear's most vulnerable spot, she concentrates and fires. The arrow enters precisely into the unprotected temple of the huge beast. Despite the predator's size and apparent clumsiness, the shot proves to be extremely effective. The carcass shakes for a moment, then collapses to the ground and begins to convulse. Stanford rushes forward, commanding them to act as quickly as possible, and orders Danny to begin the attack from a distance. Danny replies that he understood the order completely and hurries to help the commander. Both heroes jump up and prepare to unleash a combined attack on the immobilized target. Stanford also gives instructions to his allies. There is no need to carry out normal attacks on the next target. Danny moves away from the giant carcass, saying that just looking at that back is already getting tiresome. Harvey watches the procedure closely throughout, but does not interfere in order to assess the situation as accurately as possible. Aboard, Charlotte remarks that at this rate the hunt will end for today, and as always, it will be rather boring. Harvey asks her what she means, and she replies that a drone is far from the most common monster. She notes that meeting one or two of these is only possible with exceptional luck and no more than once a year. Harvey asks how many times they've killed them and hears that this is the third time their group has encountered drones in 5 months. Noticing her partner's curiosity, she adds that he seems to be very eager to learn something new. Harvey immediately apologizes for his persistence, but the girl shows him a special device that, according to her, should help him. She explains that it is a measuring device made by Jeremy Corp called the Model 7. Charlotte politely remarks that since he came to observe the hunt before the third rank test, everything should be written down. She adds that the device is a great help. It's much easier to analyze a recording than to reconstruct everything from memory. The program interface immediately informs the protagonist that the monster has full health and strength, but its shield has sagged slightly. Charlotte notes that this creature has significantly more health than most monsters, not to mention its monstrous shield. Harvey carefully analyzes the data and says that it could take forever to demolish such a shield. Suddenly, Jacob tenses up and announces that they have a serious problem. Stanford turns to him and asks what he's talking about and hears that 4 of the second team's fighters have disappeared from the map.
Tank asks in shock, "Does this mean that a group of experienced veterans was destroyed?"
Harvey turns around, alarmed, and asks what the disappearance of these marks even means. Looking around tensely, he suddenly notices movement near one of the abandoned buildings. The walls of the gigantic structure begin to crack. Something is clearly hitting them from within. The cracks grow wider and wider, heralding the arrival of a deadly creature. Eventually, the concrete collapses, leaving a huge hole in the building, through which an eerie shadow immediately seeps. One of the heroes, in horror, recognizes the creatures breaking through the wall and says that they are praying mantises. Harvey realizes that the situation is rapidly getting out of control and is about to become very difficult. Jacob warns his comrades, and Stanford asks how much time is left before they arrive. The frightened tracker replies that the creatures will be here in less than 2 minutes. Stanford tries to save at least part of the team and advises Harvey and Charlotte to leave and wait in a safe place. Harvey notes to himself that the alarming premonition was not in vain and warned him of danger in advance. Without thinking twice, he grabs Charlotte's hand and pulls her along with him so that she doesn't get hurt. The girl freezes with fear for a moment, and the guy tries to shake her awake, shouting at the top of his voice that she needs to leave immediately. Charlotte finally comes to her senses and, with a frightened face, replies that she understands everything. However, instead of retreating, Harvey leads his partner straight to Stanford, which causes him genuine amazement. In response to the commander's question, he replies that it's simply impossible to break away at such a distance. If they catch up, they will tear him to pieces. Stanford is shocked by such insubordination and reminds them that it was he who gave the order to retreat. Harvey tries to reason with the commander. There is no retreat. The mantises are too fast, and it will still take half an hour to kill the drone. Stanford considers his comrade's words, and Harvey asks what they would do if the mantis appeared right now. With these words, he raises his shield and declares that without action, their destruction is practically guaranteed. Harvey barely has time to finish his thought before one of the mantises lands a few dozen meters away from him. The creature's eyes turn red, and Harvey says that they have only one way out. The praying mantis instantly identifies the most active prey and figures out which angle to approach from. Harvey is preparing for an extremely tough fight and says he needs to hold out as long as possible. The team's situation is truly dire. Keeping up with such fast creatures in densely populated areas is almost impossible. Everyone present is simply amazed by their comrade's courage and wonders if he has gone crazy. Stanford asks if he is sure that all awakened tanks are equally strong. The mantis takes a few more steps forward, preparing to strike with lightning speed. Stanford makes one last attempt to get through. In front of him is a newcomer who hasn't even gone through virtual battles. However, the mantis's patience runs out and he unleashes a crushing blow with his claw. The attack hits Harvey's small shield, but he manages to stay on his feet. Danny looks at his friend with fear, and he replies that after the letter, he will still end up on the battlefield, so it doesn't matter to him. Continuing to block the mantis's attacks, he adds that tanks are obliged to take a hit no matter what, regardless of their experience. To confirm his intentions, he draws all attacks exclusively onto himself. Having caught the right moment, he does not waste a second and instantly stuns the enemy. Continuing his triumphant speeches, he says that it is necessary to learn as much as possible in advance, so as not to make mistakes in real battles. Danny aptly reminds his comrade that he is already in a real fight. Harvey admits it's hard to argue with that and advises them to focus on something more important. Stanford and Danny look around and find the drone slowly coming to its senses. Harvey says that if this creature is not kept in the passage, they will be crushed into dust immediately. The giant bear displays unbridled fury and lashes out with its claws again. Stanford realizes there is no time for talking and immediately raises his shield. Thanks to his massive armor and excellent training, he repels this attack as well. Having come to his senses, the commander continues to give orders, noting that Harvey is reasoning correctly. The first thing he tells Christopher to do is support Harvey so that he can buy time. He then orders Danny to help him fight the drone. But even such insight could come at a cost. A drone is no ordinary bear. His physical strength is enough to kick his opponent, something Stanford was completely unprepared for. Having missed a powerful blow, he flies several meters to the side and falls to the ground. Maintaining incredible composure, Stanford calls over a fighter named Tobias and asks him to use a binding trap on the drone. Tobias immediately replies to the commander that he will carry out the order as quickly as possible. Taking aim, he takes precise aim and throws a small trinket right at the feet of a huge bear. The beast doesn't have time to think. The device opens and heavy steel chains fly out of it. The chains bind the giant, and Tobias reports that they have about 5 minutes. Stanford stands up, calculating. The drone is right in front of them. The mantis is coming from behind. All escape routes are blocked. He admits that they gained time with difficulty, but the situation is still not hopeless. He looks at Harvey and notes how bravely the newcomer is fighting, for whom this is his first serious fight. Christopher continues to try to distract the giant praying mantis to make Harvey's life easier. But the creature's shell is so strong that regular shots won't hit it even at close range. Harvey carefully monitors the enemy's aggression level to ensure he doesn't switch to a weak shooter. To do this, he decides to hit it with his fist, which causes another fit of rage in the giant insect. However, before the mantis can gather itself for another attack, it receives a powerful blow directly to the head. Harvey turns around in surprise, and Lily remarks that it won't be easy to destroy this creature on the first try. Christopher chuckles at his partner and says the shot was great. True, such fighters pay a high price for their monstrous damage. They instantly become a priority target. Harvey doesn't have time to pull the aggression back. The giant praying mantis suddenly takes off into the air. Harvey turns sharply to his ally and advises her to leave immediately. The mantis has changed direction. The archer understands that she is in an extremely dangerous situation and needs to leave immediately. But before she can react, the mantis delivers a powerful blow to the window she is standing next to. Having received severe wounds, Lily falls to the floor and immediately feels blood begin to flow from the wounds. Christopher understands that his ally is in serious danger and frantically thinks about how to help her. He again tries to draw the giant mantis's attention to himself and fires an arrow towards the enemy. Unfortunately, the killing power is again not enough, and the arrow simply bounces off the armor. Charlotte watches what is happening from afar and frantically thinks about what to do and how to help. Harvey frantically thinks about how to provoke this creature now. He was too careless. The error arose from the belief that 2 uses of Shield Bash would be enough to keep the monster's attention on you. Having weighed everything, he decides to open the characteristics window to make an accurate calculation. He's driven by one thought. If he does not regain the mantis's attention, his ally will die. Having seen the result, he understands that the risk is quite high, but still decides to try. He uses the suppression ability to create an aura and provoke the enemy into attacking. Energy flows instantly fill a small area around the protagonist, the very one where the giant praying mantis is located. Harvey realizes that all he can do is wait and hope that the bracelet's enhancement will work right now. He keeps his dark gaze fixed on the mantis, hoping it will give up trying to eat Lily. The bet works. The mantis suddenly freezes and stops all the movement for a while. The creature slowly begins to turn its creepy head towards Harvey and Charlotte. Charlotte panics again and repeats with fear that she does not want to die a terrible death. Without thinking twice, she turns around and quickly runs away, leaving the protagonist alone with the monster. Harvey turns around to look at her, but the girl has already disappeared around the corner of a small building. However, the protagonist's eyes light up. His plan worked completely. A moment later, Stanford contacts him, asks why he hasn't responded, and advises him to leave. Harvey replies that he will be fine and that he already has a plan of action. The captain doesn't understand what they're talking about, and Harvey explains that he's already attracted the monster's attention to himself. He immediately begins to fight off the powerful attacks of the giant praying mantis, and the second tank cannot believe its ears. Meanwhile, Harvey sees a good opportunity to attack and rushes forward. He constantly keeps in mind that maintaining provocation with just normal attacks is too risky for him. He understands that he tried until the very end not to show off the copied skills, but there is no longer a choice. To at least slightly improve the situation, he decides to use the ability of the destructive body. At this moment, the praying mantis catches up with its victim and decides to finish it off with a quick and precise strike. Harvey continues to dodge, wondering if it's time to activate the attacker's passive ability. After this, according to his calculations, the basic attack will be equal in damage to the abilities of classes focused on damage dealing. Taking another short break, he smiles and thinks that everything should be fine now. He feels as if every cell in his body is rapidly awakening. He felt the same way when he awakened as a fighter and became a famous rank 8 villain. This ability is called hyper-perception and is highly sought after among any warrior. Thanks to her, Harvey easily dodges subsequent attacks and hits the enemy's limbs with his shield. The force of his blows has increased so much that even a simple blow with his shield begins to punch holes in the shell of the giant mantis. Meanwhile, Lily tries to escape the destroyed building, trying not to attract the attention of other monsters. Each new step becomes more and more difficult for her. The wounds begin to take their toll. The arrow she was clutching in her hand slowly falls to the ground with a characteristic ringing sound. The girl bitterly feels her strength fading and says that it won't get any worse today. She quickly realizes that she is losing too much blood and is no longer capable of any effort. After some time, the pain gradually subsides. Charlotte, who had previously fled the battlefield, came to save the wounded. She asked Lily not to make so much noise, otherwise the treatment will be more difficult. Lily chides her for wasting time and reminds her that if she has time to heal the archer, it's better to focus on the tank. Charlotte advises not to worry about Harvey. She won't be able to treat him until he gets wounded anyway. She says about the main character that this guy is really crazy and adds that he takes all the responsibility on himself, as if he were the leader here. Meanwhile, Harvey continues his fierce battle with the giant monster, not succumbing to its deadly power. Danny and Stanford fight back against the giant drone to free themselves and help their comrade as quickly as possible. The drone itself begins to feel its shield gradually weakening and tries to figure out what to do. Stanford tells Danny that there's no point in wasting time on basic attacks. He needs to bombard the creature with every available ability. Danny asks what will happen if he steals the monster's attention again, but his friend replies that he won't allow that. At the same moment, the drone raises its huge paws above its head to bring them down on the attackers. The tank immediately raises a huge shield and warns that his own attack will work right now. After waiting for the right moment, he launches a new attack to disrupt the enemy's actions. Immediately after this, he rushes forward, remembering that the trap will fall in just 10 seconds. Not missing the chance to give the right order, he turns to Danny and commands him to act immediately. Danny leaps forward and soars above his stunned opponent, who has lost all ability to move. Realizing that every second counts, he activates the system and shouts the name of the ability that deals a critical hit. A moment later, lightning strikes the giant creature, causing it to shudder in incredible pain. Danny hopes the blow is enough, and to his delight, the monster begins to evaporate. Stanford reminds him that it's too early to celebrate and tells his comrade that it's all over here and it's time to move on to the next monster. Danny takes a couple of steps forward and sees that the creature left behind some very valuable trophies. He announces that he just dropped a basic item and a very valuable skill card, practically a jackpot. Stanford reprimands his ally. Now is not the time for celebration. He needs to help Harvey. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues to fight with an opponent who is much larger than him and achieves noticeable success. Noticing this, Stanford looks at him in amazement and cannot understand what is happening at all. Harvey turns to them and says that since they're done hunting, let them help him finish off this creature. Danny reminds his friend that he did almost all the work himself and asks why he should even share the result. Stanford notes that Harvey doesn't see any problems with this monster and suggests that he finish the beast off himself. The rest of the team say they have no objection to the proposal. The only one who disagrees is Lily, who states that she is not used to being in debt. With these words, she fires several quick shots at the enemy to help the protagonist. The arrows hit the mantis directly on the claws, briefly disorienting it. Harvey realizes that the opportunity must be seized immediately and jumps high into the air. Once above the enemy, he unleashes all his power on him along with his heavy shield. The unsuspecting praying mantis falls victim to this deadly technique and falls to the ground. Stanford and Danny watch this, unable to believe their eyes. The captain says that the friend Danny brought turned out to be much more interesting than he initially thought. Harvey removes the shield from his opponent's body and shakes off excess blood. Stanford asks his comrade if this man really woke up as a tank and not some kind of combat vehicle. After some time, night falls, and the team slowly sums up the results of their incredible raid. Stanford orders the squad to gather little by little so as not to linger in this dangerous place. He adds that he understands perfectly well how exhausted everyone is, but if we drag it out, even more monsters will come running here. Harvey tidies up his combat gear, wiping it down with a clean rag. Danny approaches his partner and asks if he used that same mysterious ability in the fight with the mantis. Harvey looks at his comrade in surprise and clarifies that he is talking about the hyperperception that he turned on every time he had to rise in battle. Danny explains that otherwise the moves he showed in that fight simply wouldn't have made sense. Deciding not to put any more pressure on his friend, he asks how he's feeling and reminds him that this ability used to give him a headache. Harvey replies that he feels perfectly fine and suggests that it's because he's awakened. Danny says that today they should definitely take a walk and stop at a cafe for something tasty. Harvey replies that he will have to postpone it. He is spending this evening with his brother and sister. Stanford decides not to keep his suspicions to himself, approaches Harvey, and asks who he really is. He wonders how a man who woke up only yesterday morning can fight with such efficiency and confidence. Harvey replies that he himself is tormented by exactly the same thoughts. The explanation turns out to be completely unconvincing. The rest of the team begin to look at him with bewilderment. Trying to somehow get out of it, Harvey claims that the situation has reached a dead end, so he did it unconsciously, releasing some kind of superhuman force. Stanford takes a couple more steps towards him and asks if he really thinks anyone will believe that. Harvey freezes, realizing that the situation is worsening with every second and that an explanation must be found urgently. Stanford turns to the team and announces that he has a very important announcement to make. The captain states that Harvey single-handedly defeated the mantis today, but he has not yet officially been registered as an awakened one. He adds that the circumstances were against them, and they were left with no choice, but the consequences of the fight before registration are known to everyone. Immediately after this, he suggests that the team keep what happened a secret so as not to expose each other or Harvey. Lily smiles, making it clear that she agrees with the proposal and knows how to keep her mouth shut. Christopher and his friend smile and say that there is no need to worry about them. They are not so stupid as to talk about such things. Harvey approaches Stanford to explain something, but Stanford simply thanks him. Harvey looks at him in surprise, trying to understand why the captain would keep his secret. Stanford replies that if Harvey hadn't helped them, they would all have been eaten by that creature. He also says that this time Harvey will be included in the list of those receiving a share of the profits. Harvey asks, surprised, if that means everyone else will get less because of him. Charlotte confirms that this is true, and then asks who would ever complain about such an assignment. Harvey looks down in embarrassment, realizing that he now owes a lot to this girl. Stanford adds that if anyone on the team has any objections, let them speak up. He is open to any criticism. Charlotte smiles and says that if anyone is against this decision, she will simply stop treating him. Harvey's phone rings and he says he needs to answer it immediately. Charlotte asks if it's his beloved calling, and he answers with a smile that it's his younger brother and sister. However, upon looking at the screen, he discovers that the call is coming from the association. Harvey is trying to figure out why the association contacted him at such an inopportune time. The exam is still a long way off. After some time, he arrives at the association building to meet his recent acquaintance. He walks into the testing room and asks Boris if they have decided to reschedule his test. The researcher reports that the hunters sent to Thailand are returning today. Harvey asks what his test has to do with it, and hears that high-ranking monsters broke out in Bangkok a week ago, and the best were sent there. Boris adds that Korea ranks third in Asia in terms of the number of hunters, after China and Japan, but has made a greater contribution to this mission than the Japanese. According to him, the association clings to big news and tries to squeeze the maximum out of it. Harvey looks up and wonders if this means they just want to get rid of him quickly. After thinking for a moment, he turns to Boris, says that he is ready to begin, and apologizes for the rush. He proceeds to the briefing. The test will take place in virtual combat mode, and the suit and shield on it are special equipment. As the monster begins to materialize out of nowhere, Harvey notes that it all looks a lot like a simulation room from a past life. Boris announces that the enemy will be an F-class fighter called the Zero. He reminds that the fight lasts an hour, and the longer Harvey lasts, the better. Turning around, he sees three mysterious people in front of him. These are the judges of the test, and Boris is checking with them whether it is possible to begin. The leader of the trio nods silently so as not to waste time. Boris turns back to Harvey and confirms that he has understood the instructions. Immediately after this, he turns on the microphones and announces that the test begins right now. The monster created in virtual space immediately rushes into battle to destroy the enemy. Harvey easily dodges the attack of the clumsy creature, involuntarily wondering if the best hunters have really been hurted here. Immediately after this, he turns the weapon towards the enemy and decides that it is time to use a shield strike. The move hits its target and throws the virtual monster back, but it maintains its balance. Harvey figures that if this ability can copy anyone, regardless of their position, that's a huge victory. The giant monster anticipates a glorious slaughter, and an almost human smile spreads across its face. Harvey senses his mood and smiles back, showing that he is ready to fight back. The monster takes off and quickly reduces the distance to its target. Harvey quickly notices that the creature's senses are heightened, which impresses him. As he dodges, he figures the average hunting time for one of these is 4 hours, and his result in the third stage looks stronger than the second, and that's rather bad. In his opinion, this will only increase the association's suspicions and attract unnecessary attention to him. Continuing to fight, he decides that for the sake of a clean picture, he must act strictly according to the textbook. He decides to simply fill the allotted time with well-thought-out maneuvers, not to overdo it, but not to slow down either. A lot of time passes, and Harvey still stands as if nothing happened, demonstrating miracles of fortitude and endurance. Boris, who is watching all this, notes that the entire test sees the same movements. He thinks what a miracle it would be if this guy didn't fail the test, and decides to find out the judge's opinion. However, turning around, he realizes that what he saw made a strong impression on the judges. The leader of the trio says he can't believe it. Today they are witnessing the birth of an outstanding newcomer, the likes of which haven't been seen for a long time. The woman notices that as soon as the monster opens its mouth, Harvey immediately strikes, and when necessary, he immediately retreats, maintaining an even level of aggression. The man in glasses adjusts his frames and says that the most amazing thing is how the guy fends off attacks without moving much throughout the entire test. Suddenly, the woman turns to her companions and says that she doesn't want to disturb them, but she urgently needs to step away. With these words, she heads for the door, carefully avoiding her colleagues so as not to bump into anyone. The second man also states that he seems to have overeaten at breakfast and that he also needs to leave immediately. The man in glasses watches his colleague leave, and a smile spreads across his face. He understands perfectly well what this means. Left alone with the research assistant and this spectacle, he notices that Harvey is darting like a small rat. According to him, there is practically no point in continuing testing further. Boris turns to his interlocutor and asks if he is really so sure of this. The man doesn't answer the rhetorical question and reaches into the inside pocket of his jacket. A moment later, he takes out his phone and says he needs to step away for a bit. At this point, the woman who evaluated the candidate is already calling her colleagues and informing them that today's test subject has limitless potential. The second judge, also lying about the reason for leaving, calls his superiors to report. This man is something outstanding. On the other end, they ask what he means, and he replies that he also heard from the teacher. The most difficult thing is the movement from the textbook. Finally, the third judge watches Harvey for a while longer and finds no reason to find fault with his fighting style. After this, he also picks up the phone and reports to his superiors that they have a classic example in front of them. He emphasizes that his verdict is final and cannot be appealed. He also warns that two other unions, whose representatives applied for the assessment, could seize the initiative if nothing is done in advance. According to him, everything must be done to ensure that no one manages to poach such a valuable fighter. After a while, the event ends and Harvey receives a certificate at the reception. The girl says that he did a great job and warns him he must not lose the Awakened One's letter under any circumstances. Harvey studies the document carefully, wondering what doors it opens for him. The girl adds that getting a C class the first time she woke up was really impressive, and Harvey asks if she thinks that's a bad thing. The girl replies that she meant exactly the opposite. Class C immediately after waking up is incredibly rare. Harvey peers at his interlocutor, trying to figure out whether she is joking or serious. The girl, with a completely calm face, explains that fighters usually receive category E or F. Harvey walks away slowly, wondering to himself why he got such a high grade again when he didn't do anything special. Then he finally smiles. In any case, the registration issue is finally closed. He understands that now all that remains is to complete the legal formalities and live peacefully with his brother and sister. His thoughts are interrupted by loud shouts from the crowd and the appearance of several irresistible personalities. He turns his head and sees police holding back an incredible number of people rushing to get to the celebrities. Taking a closer look, he recognizes them as the same hunters who just returned from a mission in Thailand. The first of this legendary trio is a sorceress named Cecilia, the second-ranked attacker in the national rankings. The second one is Kevin, and he just happens to be in first place in this ranking. Rounding out the top three is Stuart, the #1 tank in the national rankings. Harvey recognizes him and mentally asks why he has such a miserable face. He also remembers that this man has a bad reputation and wonders what the consequences of trying to talk will be. Harvey knows he has no choice but to take decisive action if he wants to learn these skills. With these words, he takes a few steps towards the trio, and they look at him in surprise. He immediately pretends to be a rather pathetic person, politely greets, and introduces himself as an admirer. He says it is a great honor for him to meet them and see his idols in person. Cecilia replies that she is also very glad to meet him and asks if she should sign something for him. Harvey politely explains that it's not quite like that and that he wasn't actually talking to her. After this, he talks about what a huge fan he is of Stuart and how he always dreamed of being like him. Stuart looks at Harvey in surprise and asks him again if he is serious. Harvey gets even more scared, deciding that he messed up and said something wrong, angering his idol. Meanwhile, the stern giant leans towards the protagonist and asks him again what he just said. The behavior is so frightening that Harvey is momentarily speechless. Taking a closer look, he notices an extremely angry expression on his idol's face. As Stuart advances on him, he has time to think about how anyone could mistake him for a villain. He asks himself with apprehension, is this big guy really going to hit him? After a moment, Stuart stops and repeats the question out loud. What exactly did he just say? Harvey comes to his senses and timidly replies that he confessed his love to him. Stewart immediately turns to his colleagues and asks if they heard that. Kevin bursts out laughing, and Cecilia frowns and says she's almost right. Harvey tries to figure out what the deal is, unaware of any special agreement between the three. Cecilia throws out with disgust that if this monkey had not announced her admirer, everything would have been completely different. 30 minutes ago, the trio were riding in a limousine, and an extremely curious dialogue began between them. Kevin reminded Stewart of a time when a man came up to him and said he was a fan of his, and Stewart sent him away because he was annoying. Cecilia agreed. She had never seen anyone who called themselves a fan of Stewart. She added that such things simply don't happen. No one wants to get hit on the head. Cecilia also reminded that Stewart knows very well how much she dislikes men who constantly lie. Stewart said that he had no intention of deceiving her. He is the country's #1, and he definitely has fans. Cecilia responded skeptically. If at least one person confessed their love to Stewart before entering the association, she would accept his invitation to dinner. Stewart asked her with a smile if she was serious, and she immediately added that if no one came up, he would have to help her once. Stewart looked at his interlocutor in surprise, trying to understand what she was trying to achieve. Cecilia explained that they were planning to hunt a Class C monster in Genesis, and the guild was short of tanks. The gist of the request is that if he loses the bet, he will work as the main tank at least once. She emphasized that the service should be absolutely free, out of pure enthusiasm. Now, one can imagine the unimaginable joy that Stewart experienced when he came face to face with the suddenly materialized admirer. And one can just as well imagine the indignation of Cecilia, who never expected that her own words would turn against her. Stewart continues to pepper Harvey with leading questions and clarifies whether he is truly his admirer. Harvey thinks this whole thing smacks of concentrated schizophrenia and considers running away. However, a moment later, Stewart extends his hand to his most devoted fan to seal their friendship. Harvey looks at this gesture in surprise, trying to understand what is going on. Stewart says he'd be happy to sign something for a fan, but he doesn't have a pen, so he'll just shake hands. Harvey still doesn't understand what's going on with this man, but he still accepts the offer. He quickly shakes his idol's hand and thinks about how well everything is working out, just like never before. The touch immediately triggers the copy ability, and some of the skills are transferred to him. Stewart looks at Harvey with interest and then asks his name. Harvey states his name to the country's top tank, quickly hands him a business card, and tells him to call if he needs help. Right after this, Kevin comes up to take a closer look at the man. Harvey looks at the second hunter in surprise, trying to figure out what it was about him that surprised him so much. Kevin takes a couple of steps, extends his hand, and says his name, and in response, hears that everyone here knows that name. Playing the part of an impressed fan, Harvey squeezes his hand, not forgetting to start the copying process. Kevin remarks that he would never have believed that a national treasure would be discovered in such a place. Stewart, feigning indignation, asks his friend if he really just called his only admirer a national treasure. Immediately after this, he gives his friend a friendly hug and asks them to wrap up their chatter. The association president is waiting for them. Without thinking twice, they head to the elevator to get to their destination without being late. Cecilia walks past Harvey and remarks that what's happening is getting on her nerves more and more. Harvey takes a couple of steps towards her, says that he is her admirer too, and asks if he can shake her hand. He adds that it would be an incredible honor for him, but the girl is not at all eager to participate. Without thinking twice, she turns around in disgust and demonstratively leaves without saying a word. Harvey looks after her with disappointment and regrets that she did not agree to an autograph or at least a handshake. After this, he decides that the moment of sadness and pain must end, and he needs to return home as soon as possible. Already on the street, a smile appears on his face. He has just learned several extremely useful skills. At the same time, somewhere within the American Association of Awakened People, serious information waves are rising. One of the senior employees of the corporation asks a colleague what he is currently seeing on the screen. After reviewing the test footage, he notes with amazement, in 3 hours, Harvey used up only 3% of his life force, a phenomenal result. Immediately after this, he asks which side this person is on and what his name is. Upon learning that the guy is from Korea, he wonders if it's all a scam. The subordinate replies that these people don't even suspect that they are being followed, so there is no need for them to put on an act. The blonde employee immediately reaches for the phone, but he stops her, advising her not to rush into things. He adds that it is too early to report to his superiors and that further checks are needed, but his colleague reminds him that awakened individuals of this level are rare in the world. She notes that there are only 5 of them and they all started as C-rank rookies. The American Association employee understands that he essentially has nothing to say in response to this. At the same time, a more enterprising colleague notes, if they delay, such a promising person will simply be missed. A few moments later, she contacts the director and reports that she has just reviewed a recording of a tank from Korea registered with a C rank. Her colleague, meanwhile, continues to watch what is happening with a fair amount of suspicion. The employee says some things still need to be confirmed, but the results so far are incredible. She adds that the recording can easily be sent to the director for review. After some time, the action returns to Korea where the main character continues his adventures. Using his portal control skills, he can easily collapse spatial distances. He approaches the door to go down to his apartment, trying not to attract unnecessary attention. As he descends, he reflects on how his passive effects have increased to level 3, significantly increasing his defense and reducing damage taken. He also notes that the added stats increased evasion and health while also reducing elemental damage. In his thoughts, he is transported to those battlefields where the fighters whose skills he just copied fought. These people are the pride of the country, which means they stood up to monsters that would make anyone sick just by looking at them. Harvey estimates that abilities like Empower and Taunt deal quite a bit of damage. In his opinion, in a moment of crisis, this could become an excellent trump card that no one expects from him. After understanding the details of the skills, he realizes that he can now hit the enemy with his shield and simultaneously turn the aggression towards himself. But that's not all, because the main character stole abilities not only from the best tank in the country. Harvey notes that Kevin's unique abilities don't have a starting point that would boost attacks, but that's not the point. This man's main trump card is the Speedmaster skill, which triples his movement speed and simultaneously boosts his other stats. It also has the ability to be instantly cast, a real jackpot for a class like a tank. Thanks to it, you can instantly take the most advantageous positions and squeeze the most out of them. Moreover, this same ability gives an enhanced first attack after teleportation with 100% critical damage. This attack can trap an enemy and knock off half their health. No one expects that kind of damage from a tank. According to the system data, it is possible to teleport to any point within a radius of several hundred meters. For someone who wants to build a life so that their family is never in danger again, this is simply great news. He continues down the stairs and mentally congratulates himself on such an incredible win. He excitedly figures out that by combining the skills he's learned from different fighters, he'll become the most versatile warrior in the world. With this set, the main character will now be able to single-handedly take on medium-sized monsters in the beginner's zone. Harvey enters the apartment, looks around slowly, and realizes that it is too quiet. The silence begins to weigh on him, although in his mind he understands that everything's fine with his family. Still, he decides to check and slowly walks down the corridor. His gaze catches on the untouched bag of fast food. He touches it and realizes that the food is completely cold. Now his face shows genuine suspicion. The children would hardly have left dinner untouched. He is just thinking about eating it himself and wondering why the children haven't touched it when he suddenly hears his sister's voice behind him. Harvey turns and looks at her, trying to figure out why none of them have eaten. His sister rubs her sleepy eyes and asks why he is so late. He replies that he had things to do. After taking a couple more steps, he asks if she has eaten anything at all today. The girl rubs her eyes again and says that she has decided that it will be much better if they eat together. Harvey reminds them that he clearly asked them to eat and not wait for him. But his sister stands her ground. She admits that she didn't feel like eating at all, and this causes genuine surprise in the protagonist. The girl quickly hugs her older brother and says that she dreamed that he would die, and he still didn't answer her calls. She adds that she couldn't get through to him. She became incredibly scared, and her appetite completely disappeared. Harvey hugs his sister and assures her that these are just nightmares. He does not plan to die anytime soon. A few moments later, the brother comes out of his room and looks at the main character in surprise. He also runs up and hugs him, saying that they have waited an awfully long time and have already lost all hope. Harvey thinks he should be careful. After all, he promised himself that he would treat the children properly upon his return. Without thinking twice, he agrees to have dinner with his brother and sister. reflecting that due to his constant busyness, he's completely stopped spending time with them. Sitting at a small table, he thinks that this is precisely why he returned to the past and refused to die. Gradually, real night thickens over the city, and the children give in to their natural needs. They quickly settle down and peacefully fall into a deep sleep, which the protagonist is very happy about. Harvey himself goes to his room to develop some photographs that will be very useful to him in the future. A lot of time passes, and the photos are finally ready. Harvey takes out his phone, thinking that now he did everything right. He goes to a special website and notes that all that remains is to register the product and wait for the buyer. The procedure takes time, and silence falls over the room. After some time, he looks through the photographs again and realizes that some of these items are too valuable to sell. Lingering on one of the skill cards, he decides to buy it back to take the ability for himself forever. Suddenly, the system reports that the skill could not be acquired. The user's class does not match the skill type. Then he decides to copy the ability by touch, but the system responds that the copying failed. The target is not awakened. Harvey thinks hard and realizes that he has almost no options left to acquire this skill. Suddenly, incredible electrical discharges flash through his neurons, and the system reports the completion of creating a personal core for the user of the original system. Harvey clutches his head as it begins to split, and the system continues to bombard him with information. The windows show that a central functional system has been created, as well as the ability to absorb the essence needed for the development of the core. An incredible flood of notifications, accompanied by a very strange sound, begins to irritate the main character. The volume of this sound increases with each second, becoming higher and higher until it reaches its peak. Harvey recalls how, a few days ago, the system had already notified him that the core had begun to form. At the time, he didn't pay any attention to it, noting that he had never heard anything like that from any of his friends. After that, he assumed that he would only figure everything out when the formation was finally completed. It seems that this moment has arrived, and now Harvey needs to somehow cope with the changes in his own body. The newly formed core responds to the completion of the procedure and begins to overflow with unprecedented power. Harvey looks at his hands and thinks how this sensation is similar to what he felt when he first woke up. His eyes flash with a bright fire, and he decides to immediately test what his body is now capable of. To find out, he immediately sets out to hunt in an abandoned area. To get there faster, he decides to go by car. On the way, he logs into the system to find the information he needs. Harvey tries to understand what the original system is and gets the answer. It is divided into two parts, the power of creation and the power of copying. He asks what the main system or system of creation is and learns that it serves as the basis for all derivative systems. The program also informs that this system exists as a unique whole and is thus fundamentally different from awakening systems. Having figured it out, he finds out who the master copyist is and receives the answer. He's able to copy any skills generated by the power of creation. It also follows that the master copyist can copy any object, including life forms affected by derivative systems. Harvey realizes that the meaning of these words still eludes him, no matter how much he reads them. A few minutes pass, and he finally makes it out onto a small roof where he can be alone with his thoughts. Looking around, he discovers that everything around is covered in debris. However, Harvey is not bothered by this, and he decides to take a break and recuperate. Taking out a bottle of water, he notes that the information search function has proven extremely useful. Immediately after this, he thinks about the fact that access to it opened only after the formation of the core. Having gained confidence in his own abilities, he verbally commands the system to open the status window. The system immediately executes the order and shows that the status window has also changed noticeably. As a result of these changes, it acquired functions that were not even present before. He smiles as he discovers that the ability to expand all the functions was also given to him by the owner of the original system. Having studied the basic characteristics, he immediately takes up the parameters of the newly created system core. According to the data received, these glasses give him the ability to recharge, an additional reserve of energy as a backup power source. Taking a closer look at the bracelet, he realizes that with this device, he can achieve incredible efficiency. What is even more unexpected is that all of these characteristics are only at the first level. He smiles, realizing that as his strength grows, these abilities will develop very quickly, and new ones will appear soon. His thoughts are interrupted by a terrible howl, instantly capturing Harvey's attention. Without a second's hesitation, he goes to find out who emitted this wild, chilling scream. On closer inspection, he realizes that his initial guess was correct. At such a late hour and in such a dangerous place, such sounds could only be made by dangerous monsters, and giants at that. Harvey decides to plan an attack and immediately opens the map to properly study the area. The scanner of living beings reports that there is not a single living soul nearby except this monster. A pleased Harvey realized the time and place are perfect to test his new skills. Meanwhile, the monster continues to roar, shaking its head from side to side in search of prey. After some time, it freezes, having discovered in front of it a short man who does not pose any threat. This turn of events surprises even the huge monster. He certainly didn't expect such behavior from people. Harvey is acting more than strangely and stands completely still, as if he is waiting for some kind of order. In fact, it's a clever calculation. After a few moments, he commands the system to apply the weapon upgrade. While the program offers the protagonist to choose a weapon, the monster emits a threatening roar. He immediately rushes forward to crush the small pawn and finally have a normal lunch. Harvey makes his choice and asks the system to summon a longbow. The system immediately carries out the command, and an energy circuit flashes in his hands. Looking at this weapon, the boy begins to understand why the person whose abilities he copied was so strong. The monster quickly advances towards its prey, hoping to crush it in a matter of moments. But the greedy instincts of this brainless creature lead it straight to the grave. Harvey knows perfectly well how to deal with such monsters. Before the monster can reach him, he fires energy arrows at him. Without giving the enemy time to recover from the first blow, he immediately switches to rapid fire and a precise shot. At the same time, he analyzes his own indicators and discovers that everything except the basic ones is already cranked up to the maximum. The increase in killing power is visible to the naked eye. The giant creature instantly loses all desire to fight, but even a mighty roar will not save her from a sad fate. The monster completely loses its balance and freezes for a second, trying to somehow collect itself. Harvey decides to take advantage of this and rushes forward, not giving his opponent a chance to recover. As he runs, he again gives the command to upgrade his weapon in order to deliver another surprise attack. Taking a small step forward, he asks the system to replace the bow with a longsword. A smile appears on his face. Since he can handle energy weapons so freely, it means that Roger's abilities have completely transferred to him. At that moment, he rises into the air to take the perfect position to attack. As Harvey charges at his opponent, he wonders if this means he's as strong as he used to be. Once close, he immediately delivers a crushing blow. After a fierce fight, the monster finally falls to the ground and gives up its spirit. After making sure the monster is dead, Harvey takes a breather and chuckles quietly. He takes out his phone and stops the timer. The murder took an hour and 20 minutes. He's not happy with the result. With other monsters burrowing nearby, such a fuss could turn into a disaster. He decides to reduce the limit to 30 minutes, and then the phone suddenly starts vibrating. Looking at the screen, he sees a call from the Awakened Association and decides to answer it immediately. At the same time, he cannot understand why the association would call him at such a late hour. After a few moments, he answers and asks the person on the other end what he needs. The administrator, introducing herself as Stella, answers. The main character is quite surprised that he suddenly became the object of interest of the association. The girl says that she called to check if he was asleep and asks if it was convenient to talk. Deciding not to tempt fate, he replies that he can, and hears that they have received an unexpected letter from the Secretariat. Turning around, Harvey discovers that another monster has appeared in the area, and it has already noticed him. Stella reports that the association president himself wants to meet in person, and Harvey clarifies whether this is today. The girl replies that it is easy to arrange and asks what time is convenient for him. She notes that the president always starts work at 7 in the morning, and the protagonist suggests meeting then. Stella suddenly asks if he is sure, reminding him that there are only 40 minutes left until that time. Meanwhile, the monsters continue to inexorably approach the place where Harvey stands. The young man confidently declares that he will be there in half an hour. After hanging up, he turns his gaze to the monster, which is rushing towards him at incredible speed, making threatening sounds. For a monster, it is already a matter of honor. For a fallen kinsman, Harvey realizes he doesn't have time to fight now and decides to use his stunning ability. The creature swings threateningly, but its attack is immediately cut short by the skill that triggered. Harvey decides to take extreme action and uses his flash ability. Having increased his speed and agility to unprecedented heights, he instantly finds himself behind the clumsy monster. He touches his body, and the system asks if he wishes to copy the abilities of a private soldier. Harvey confirms his agreement, after which he delivers a powerful blow to the back of the huge creature's head. A moment later, he lands spectacularly, without a single scratch. The system reports that the copying is complete and decides to open the subspace. He immediately receives a notification that a high-ranking core has been detected nearby. Without thinking twice, the protagonist decides to absorb this core in order to raise his own level. The system notifies about the beginning of the process of absorption of the foreign core. After a few moments, a mysterious power and purple glow begin to fill the protagonist's body. He notes that raising the baseline right now can save a ton of time. Having decided to swallow the valuable trophy whole, he instantly raises the level of his core by several notches. The fate of the monster that recklessly rushed into attack is now completely obvious. Harvey opens a branch of the Awakened, using his ability to manipulate space. He takes out his phone and thinks that at this rate, he will significantly shorten the path to the Second Awakening. Looking closely at the screen, he realizes that there are only 5 minutes left before the meeting starts. However, his body begins to fail him. His stomach rumbles incredibly loudly. He remembers that he hasn't really eaten all day and admits that he is dying of hunger. But punctuality is an expensive quality, so he still heads towards the association building. Already in the elevator, he decides not to waste time and opens the system window to see what exactly he removed from the monsters. In the notice, he discovers that the lesser members of his own race now recognize him as one of their own. There is one extremely important caveat in the skill description. It does not apply to high-ranking individuals. Satisfied, the protagonist exits the elevator, realizing that he can now be relatively calm in the starting areas. He immediately notes that this is simply amazing and that the ability must be activated every time he goes hunting alone. The president's assistant opens the door for him so he can go to his superiors. She looks him over carefully and then says he can come in. The chairman of the association looks closely at the guest and says with a laugh that he is very glad to meet him. Harvey takes a few steps forward, looks at the president in surprise, and hesitantly replies that he is also very happy. The old man advises not to be shy and to sit in a comfortable chair. He also asks whether the guest would consider it disrespectful if the conversation took a more informal tone. Harvey feels a tension run through his body and replies that he doesn't see anything wrong with it. The association's president admits he was very surprised by Harvey's willingness to show up for the meeting so early. Harvey replies that it's because he has to take care of his younger brother and sister. This information makes the president pause for a moment and carefully assess his interlocutor with his gaze. After a while, he begins to laugh sincerely, which confuses the main character. He then says that Harvey turned out to be even more interesting than he expected and notes that he doesn't quite understand the sense of humor of today's youth. Immediately after this, he suddenly becomes serious and announces that it is time to get down to business. Harvey looks at his interlocutor with interest, trying to understand where he is leading. The president states that the organization wants to make him a very lucrative offer. He looks at the guy intently and asks if he is ready to refuse foreigners and stay in Korea. Harvey is silent, carefully weighing every word he hears. However, after some time, he says that he does not understand what is being discussed and reports that he has not received any offers from foreign guilds. The association's president claims that, according to his sources, several of the largest unions in the United States are showing interest in him. Harvey asks, in surprise, if they are really talking about American guilds. The president responds that it is extremely difficult to admit this, but his test data apparently was hacked and leaked. Harvey assumes there is some misunderstanding and asks if the spies only know his class. The president replies that the spies have determined exactly who Harvey woke up as. Harvey clarifies whether Class C is really that impressive, adding that it has only awakened once. The chairman asks if he knows what class most people who have experienced a second awakening receive, and adds that it is usually exactly the same class. He throws up his hands. By this simple logic, Harvey is already on par with most of those who have awakened twice. Harvey listens intently, realizing that even more opportunities are opening up before him to win a place in the sun. The president continues and suggests imagining what would happen if Harvey revealed his qualities to the maximum already on his second awakening. Harvey figures that this means that a second awakening will put him on par with those who have awakened 3 times. The older man says that, based on the tank's capabilities, The association considers Harvey a valuable asset even without reaching peak performance. At that moment, the secretary approaches the main character and he notices a small folder in her hands. The president of the Awakened Association declares that they cannot afford to lose such a promising fighter and moves on to a commercial proposal. He says the initial payment will be 1 billion won and his team will be completely tax exempt. The document also stipulates that he will be given 2 units of Class A equipment free of charge. He holds out his pen and clarifies that the contract will be valid until his second awakening. He emphasizes that the deal looks extremely profitable and all Harvey needs to do is sign it. Harvey thinks for a moment, trying to decide what to do in this situation. Then he looks at his interlocutor with distrust and says that he listened to the proposal but did not catch something. He asks the president if all this support is just for him to stay in Korea and if there are any additional conditions attached to it. The man rises from his chair and praises his interlocutor for his incredible intelligence. The document also contains other conditions, including a ban on accepting the citizenship of the other party for the entire duration of the contract. He also states that joining Harvey's guilds will be prohibited and participation in foreign missions will have to be coordinated with the association. In conclusion, he explains that if the association sends him a request, he is obliged to consider it first. Harvey concludes, from all this, it follows that no one can stand between him and the association. The president replies that in a union, any decision on an application is made by the management, which means their goals, not his, will be the priority. Harvey asks if there are any other mandatory conditions besides those he heard and receives a negative answer. The president warns that the offer is only valid until he contacts the Americans, but Harvey is already pulling out a pen. He calmly says that there is no point in delaying this and signs it. The association chairman asks again if he needs time to think. Harvey extends his hand and replies that there is nothing to think about. The president says he really likes Harvey's determination and shakes his hand, not realizing what the outcome will be. After some time, Harvey goes for a walk with his brother and sister. They find themselves in a large department store with a wide selection of shops. Children, who have rarely been to such places, happily run here and there and look at everything. Shopping malls are still full of things that can surprise little ones who are not yet familiar with their old life. While browsing a clothing store, Harvey's younger brother asks if he can wear it. His sister asks him to be quiet or they will be kicked out, but Harvey suggests they try on something. He adds that they can choose absolutely any clothes, which greatly surprises the young talents. At the same time, he clarifies that you can take up to 10 things. Happy children say that in this case, they will take everything they like. Harvey is lost in his thoughts for a long time, realizing that events have taken an unexpected turn lately. He also admits that he was very afraid of getting into trouble after the rookie protection period ended. Meanwhile, the younger sister chooses a short dress and asks her brother how he likes it. Harvey notes that joining the association turned out to be an exceptionally successful step with minimal obligations. The store employee approaches the children and politely explains that they are not allowed to touch the clothes displayed like this. Meanwhile, Harvey continues to run through his mental list of tasks he must complete. He approaches the woman and says there is nothing to worry about. He will buy whatever the children want. Smiling at her, he thinks again that he has no reason to leave Korea anytime soon. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a voice from the loudspeaker, alarming all shoppers. A door has suddenly appeared next to the department store. The alarmed announcer repeats that the doors have appeared right next to the building and pose a direct threat to everyone nearby. Harvey realizes that events are rushing forward and unfolding in the worst possible way. A mall employee tries to calm the crowd, saying that the hunters are about to arrive and everyone needs to remain calm. He asks the others to wait for further instructions, but some are beginning to doubt it. The girl tries to calm people down, explaining that it is much more dangerous outside now, and suggests that they follow her to a safe place. The crowd effect immediately unfolds in all its glory. One of the men pushes an unfamiliar woman, declaring that he will be the first to reach shelter. Harvey realizes that a stampede is about to start and a decision needs to be made immediately. Without thinking twice, he approaches the saleswoman and asks her to take his brother and sister to the shelter. He adds that he wants to check the situation outside, which causes complete amazement in the woman, who does not understand anything. The younger sister asks if he really needs to go out, reminding him that the girl just told him not to. Harvey understands what the real danger is. There are 5 low-ranking monsters nearby. He recalls the headlines from a past life. That day, the creatures chased people hiding in a department store, and the building eventually collapsed. The protagonist clenches his fists. He himself was not in the department store at the time, and he perceived all of this as someone else's story. He kneels down to talk to his younger sister and asks her to look after her brother. He understands that there is no guarantee that his family will get out safe, which means he will have to take responsibility himself. The decision is supported by a simple calculation. The guild will not arrive until it is too late. People near the department store rush to find shelter at any cost. More and more monsters appear behind them. Authorities are urging the public to remain calm and seek refuge in a large department store where there is a secure shelter. The crowd gathers quickly. Such a number of people are simply incapable of behaving in an organized manner. By making such a loud noise, they only attract giant monsters that might otherwise not notice them. Even one monster is a serious threat to civilians, and here 5 of them appeared at once. All these creatures are driven by an incredible thirst for blood, pushing them to kill everything that gets in their way. People continue to run for cover, wondering as they go what kind of creatures these are. Harvey is the only one who calmly stays put and waits until everyone finally runs away. He looks sternly at the approaching creatures and understands there is no choice. He will have to buy time in a fight against an enemy that outnumbers him. The monsters gradually accelerate, reducing the distance to their victims. After waiting for them to get close enough, he uses his subspace manipulation ability. Immediately after this, he changes most of his skills to tank class specific skills. The monsters sense that the person in front of them is unusual and freeze for a moment, assessing the enemy. Harvey grips his gun tightly. If even one breaks through, the brother and sister will be in danger, which means they all need to be held back. He prepares to take on all 5 at once. To engage in combat on his own terms, he applies a boost and charges forward. He lands a powerful blow directly on the leg of one of the monsters to limit its mobility. This same attack causes the monster to go into an incredible fit of rage, reliably focusing its attention on him alone. From the outside, it looks like a person is rushing between monsters at lightning speed. In reality, Harvey is capable of moving much faster, but for this particular task, he doesn't need to exert himself that much. Having carried out all the necessary attacks and attracted attention, he stops and steam begins to billow from his body. Immediately after this, he begins to carefully study his opponents in order to react according to the situation. The monsters are in no hurry to turn on the protagonist, and he decides to take extreme measures. Without thinking twice, he raises his hand and aggressively steps towards the giants to provoke them. This is enough to finally tip the scales of aggression in your favor. 5 giant monsters rush towards him, and their stomping starts a real earthquake. At the same time, the squad sent to clear the area of the creatures that had appeared gets stuck in a traffic jam. Stuart is unhappy and asks why the hunting vehicle is moving so slowly and why they can't get out. The driver explains that the roads are clogged with cars of fleeing people and the police are clearing the way, but this will take time. Stuart makes an emotional reminder that every second counts. After a while, the passenger sitting next to him puts his hand on his shoulder to get his attention. As soon as Stuart turns around, he shows the phone and says that this needs to be seen. Stuart watches the live feed from the scene and immediately sees several monsters. He also discovers that the creatures are launching a series of attacks at the young boy, who manages to hold them off with a shield. The broadcast host reports that in the area, someone is single-handedly holding off 5 monsters, and it appears to be a tank. Stuart's interlocutor repeats that a man fights 1 against 5, and Stuart wonders who he is. He looks closely at the fighting style, and Harvey, who introduced himself as his fan, immediately comes to mind. The proud tank declares that he knows this man and has seen him before. The interlocutor asks if they really know each other and admits that he cannot believe it. Stuart is incredibly proud that this guy is his fan. For Comrade Stuart, this information sounds so unreliable that he considers it complete nonsense. Stuart tells how he once returned from Thailand and met a fan there. Meanwhile, the streamer openly states that he is seriously risking his life by filming these fights. He adds that if this tank dies, he himself will face a painful end, which is something he absolutely does not want. The guy instantly gets star fever and says he's amazed himself. He keeps people informed while being on the front lines. Immediately after this, he makes strange gestures and asks viewers to support him with donations and likes. Stuart carefully reads the comments under the broadcast, and one of them particularly grabs his attention. The commenter doubts that Stuart would even be able to fight against 5 monsters at once. This seriously offends the proud tank, who has never been accustomed to looking like a coward. He immediately falls silent and tries to get out of the car, which attracts the attention of his interlocutor. He asks where he's going and reminds him that they're still stuck in traffic. The irritated tank replies that its priority is saving people, which means it needs to move out immediately. His partner tries to stop him, but the ambitious fighter doesn't even listen to the words of his close comrade. After several attempts, Stewart's friend falls silent, realizing that it is unlikely that he will be able to reason with him. The rest of the squad's fighters, who had been sitting in the car the whole time, follow them out and declare that in this case, they will go too. Finally, they apologize to the manager who rode with them the whole way. He looks at them in amazement and cannot understand whether they really get turned on so easily. One by one, the fighters peer into the horizon, considering their next plan of action. Stewart approaches the manager and asks to find out something about this new guy they just saw. The man replies that he doesn't even know his name, but then immediately says that the guy's name is Harvey. The formidable tank turns to his squad and asks if they are ready to engage in battle. The fighters, with confident faces, answer that they are always ready to defend the weak.
Stewart orders everyone to hurry and rescue the newcomer as quickly as possible.
Without thinking twice, they take off and run straight ahead to avoid getting stuck in the crowd. Meanwhile, Harvey continues to fight extremely dangerous monsters. Despite everything, his excellent speed helps him avoid serious damage. The creatures deal area of effect damage, so there's no need for them to hit Harvey directly. The shockwave will work regardless. Harvey gets up quickly and realizes that it is becoming more and more difficult to hold them with each passing minute. The monsters attack more and more often, and the main character begins to hope that someone will help and pull at least one of them towards themselves. To continue the fight against superior forces, he uses hypersensitivity. His reaction speed instantly skyrockets, and he once again easily dodges the giant's most powerful blows. True, Harvey himself understands how unlikely it is that anyone will stand up for him. For that, you would have to go crazy and seek death. Even though he is not in the best position, Harvey still does not give up and is preparing to fight further. A couple of brilliant ideas come to mind, and he rushes towards his opponents again. At the last moment, he turns sharply, pulling off a clever maneuver that buys him a little more time. One of the monsters doesn't have time to react to this movement and freezes in place for a while. He lowers his head in confusion, trying to find his victim by smell. Harvey smiles, realizing that he managed to lure the giant into a trap after all. But things don't end so well. The monster quickly figures out its target. Harvey looks at his opponent in surprise, realizing that he never expected such an outcome. The creature raises its giant paw to crush the pathetic insect that has caused it so much trouble. A moment later, Stewart appears behind her, contacts the team, and reports that he has arrived on site. Once he selects a target, he immediately applies a stun to interrupt their attack. The blow is incredibly powerful and instantly cripples the giant creature's leg. Having received serious damage, the monster retreats a few steps and stops attacking. Harvey looks in surprise at the man who came to his aid and realizes it is Stewart. Upon arriving at the scene, he immediately contacts his colleagues via radio and begins giving orders. He adds that it is necessary to check the condition of the survivors and be prepared for any unexpected events. After this, he turns to Harvey and asks his medic to take care of the young hero. Harvey sits down on the ground and asks the rescuers why they're so late. "He almost died," Stewart remarks with a smile. If he has enough strength for such cheerful screams, it means Harvey can handle 2 more monsters. He invites him to return to battle as soon as he is fully recovered. The squad's medic immediately casts a healing spell on the protagonist, but he declares that this is too much. Stewart picks up Harvey's shield and says that instead of talking, it's better to engage in battle and quickly end the hunt. With these words, he looks closely at the guy and adds that he himself already understands perfectly well how everything works. Just in case, he repeats the saying, the longer the fight lasts, the greater the damage. Harvey admits there's some truth to that and pauses for a moment. The enraged monster, meanwhile, begins to come to its senses, which attracts Stewart's attention. Harvey picks up the shield and clicks his tongue in irritation, realizing that he'll have to deal with this creature for a long time. Getting up, he notices that now, at least it will become a little easier. One of the monsters spots our heroes and immediately attacks, taking revenge for its stunned relative. Meanwhile, the action briefly moves to a shelter where many people have gathered. From there, the voice of the news anchor can be heard, announcing that they continue to monitor what is happening. The report states that the guild's hunters have been fighting at this location for about 3 hours now, and not a single monster has been defeated yet. Harvey's younger sister listens with despair as the fighters fight a truly hopeless battle. The saleswoman asks the girl how she feels and hears that she is scared. Her brother tells her not to worry. She just needs to wait a little, and her older brother will defeat these monsters. The worried girl still asks if everything will be okay because she was told that her brother is like a tank, which means he will be fine. Their conversation is interrupted by a loud announcement from the announcer. According to updated information, one of the monsters has finally been defeated. People who were following the news on their phones raised their hands in joy. The presenter continues to encourage the heroes and says that their risk has finally begun to pay off. Harvey's younger brother gets up and takes a few steps towards the people watching the broadcast, saying he wants to watch too. The store employee warns him that it's dangerous to walk there, but the boy replies that he'll just quickly glance at his phone. The sister tries to stop him, but the brother stubbornly moves forward, not paying attention to her. Meanwhile, the announcer reports that right during the release, another monster was destroyed and only 3 remain. Messages of support from viewers around the world are joining the broadcast. The men watching the broadcast say they believed in the guild and then turn their attention to Harvey. They note that this guy held off 5 monsters single-handedly for almost an hour. Harvey's younger brother approaches them and claims that the man is his relative. The men look at him in surprise, and the boy clarifies that this is his older brother. The battle drags on for quite a long time, and night gradually falls on the city. One of the guild's fighters continues to fight and quickly changes position to avoid being surrounded by monsters. The equipment in his hands makes it easy to recognize another tank that has moved forward to help Harvey. Having stunned the monster, he jumps up, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. Suddenly, several sharp blades grow on his shield, capable of cutting through anything. With one precise and fatal blow, he takes the life of the monster. Landing softly, he informs his comrades that this was the last monster, and the 7-hour hunt is finally over. Harvey wipes the sweat from his chin and realizes that now he can finally rest. A moment later, he collapses on the pavement, saying he feels like he's about to die. Stewart says he did a great job, but Harvey petulantly replies that he just wants to pass out and sleep. Stewart ignores this and admits that he doubted him, but it really was him. Harvey asks what he's talking about, and Stewart replies that Harvey woke up first and was given the highest possible score by unanimous decision. Harvey sits up abruptly to listen carefully to his comrade. Stewart looks at him intently and asks if he really is that special person. There is a pause between them. The protagonist has no idea what they are talking about. To avoid guessing, Harvey decides to ask him directly what he means. A few moments later, he hears the joyful voices of his family behind him and turns around. A large crowd approaches along with them, finally able to breathe a sigh of relief and feel safe. Harvey happily shouts out his brother and sister's names and turns completely towards them. When the children run up, he asks if they are okay and if they are hurt. The younger brother hugs him and his sister and says that everything is fine and that he protected her. Harvey replies that his brother is wonderful and an unprecedented wave of warmth washes over him. Meanwhile, one of Stewart's colleagues contacts him and informs him that he has found information about this person. Stewart continues to look at Harvey and realizes how important his brother and sister are to him. Without thinking twice, he answers his partner and advises him to forget about this idea. He doesn't understand and asks what happened and hears that there is no need to find out anything more. Harvey tells his brother and sister that as soon as they get home, he's going to order chicken for dinner. The younger brother is delighted with the idea, and the sister replies that she wants a pig's stomach. Harvey smiles and says he can afford both. After some time, he hears a female voice behind him and immediately turns around. The same saleswoman stands in front of him. She thanks him for his work and adds that without him, she would have died along with her colleagues. Harvey replies that he should be thanking her for taking care of his family. Having decided to finish with thanks, the girl simply approaches the main character and hugs him. Tears come to her eyes, and she says that she is truly grateful to him. Harvey doesn't answer and just stands there, his face starting to turn slightly red with embarrassment. A moment later, a large crowd notices it and shouts that this is the same tank from the news. People start vying with each other to discuss what an incredibly handsome and talented guy he is, since he held out against 5 monsters. Everyone in this crowd tries to hug him, and the main character is simply drawn into a sea of human embraces. Harvey is just confused about what is going on and how all these people know his name. After some time, the action moves to where the affairs of the awakened are decided. The association's president reads the news that yesterday in the city center, a single tank held off 5 monsters for about an hour. The announcer adds that the man, who awakened only a few days ago, has already reached unprecedented heights. Harvey is also in the president's office and listens attentively to this report. The older man smiles and reflects on how hard and tiring it is to be a celebrity. Harvey replies that he's not much of a celebrity and asks the president to stop making fun of him. Overall, he says, people will have to come to terms with the sudden popularity following the door incident. Harvey confirms that this is indeed the case and notes that his phone has been ringing off the hook since this morning from people trying to recruit him. The association's chairman says that the association attends such meetings and suggests calling him at any time if problems arise. Harvey asks why he was invited at all and hears that the state and others consider it necessary to register him as special. The president adds that those who break accepted class boundaries with something extraordinary are considered special. According to him, this does not necessarily mean that they are stronger than S-class fighters. Rather, they should be considered mutants. He also says that, unlike others, such people are not required by law to register, and Harvey clarifies whether that means he doesn't have to either. The president confirms that this is completely unnecessary, but if he makes such a decision, he will receive significant support from the state. Harvey remarks that he has heard about the need to go to the United States, and the president replies that this is true and that the process itself is incredibly rigorous. He also reports that many applications for special registration were submitted, but only 3 were registered. Harvey replies that he can't leave now because of his family and asks to leave the matter aside for now, and in response, he learns that they have decided to raise the level of support for him. Harvey looks at his interlocutor in surprise and asks why this is necessary, since the contract has already been signed. The president replies that the contract was originally written for a promising rookie, but now the conditions have changed. Harvey is special. He adds that Harvey is not formally an exception, but deserves the better treatment for his achievements. Under the new conditions, the number of top-class equipment increases from 2 units to 5, and on top of that comes a first-class car. Harvey points out that if support has grown, then the conditions should become tougher, but the president replies that this is not the case. Harvey scratches his cheek thoughtfully, wondering if it really is that simple. The president looks at him and asks if anything bothers him, and hears that the conditions are more than satisfactory. Right after that, Harvey says he'd like to discuss the car. He immediately asks if it is possible to pick up the car today. Within a couple of hours, he was driving around the city in a new car, which was more pleasant than the previous one in every way. At the same time, he decides to use Stuart's business card, which he received some time ago. Stuart asks who is calling, and Harvey introduces himself by his real name. The name means nothing to Stuart, and then Harvey introduces himself as his biggest and only fan. After this joke, Stuart laughs heartily and asks what kind of help is needed, and hears that he would like to meet. Stuart replies that they can see each other anytime, and Harvey says that they can see each other right now, opening a spatial passage. Stuart, surprised, asks what they are talking about and hears that the journey will take no more than 10 minutes. Stuart tries to figure out what the catch is and asks Harvey again what he means. Harvey remembers the moment he was going through his skill cards and deciding whether to sell them or not. Then he got his hands on the ability Mountain Split, which would be of great help in future battles. However, the system did not allow it to be learned. The user's class did not match the skill type. But with this skill, according to his calculations, the whole story with the door could completely rivet Stuart's attention to him. Stuart asks what he wants to change and hears that a small gift has been prepared for his idol. Stuart clarifies what he's talking about, and Harvey replies that it's not just a gift but a tank ability card called Mountain Cleave. A stunned Stuart asks again if they are talking about that same legendary ability, of which there are only 9 in the world. Harvey discusses how a tank ability, depending on how it's used, can deal more damage than an offensive ability. In his opinion, it would only be better if Korea's best tank put it into action and not some newcomer from a low-tier squad. Stuart points out that this is all rather silly. He's being offered the most coveted tank ability simply out of fan loyalty. Harvey replies that he only wants to ask one favor in return. He explains that once Stuart has mastered the skill, they will need to shake hands as a sign of mutual respect. The action moves to headquarters, where Stuart is currently located. Harvey sits down on a chair opposite Stuart and his friend, who also works as his manager. After a short pause, he takes a map out of his pocket and places it on the table for everyone to see. Stuart looks at the ability in amazement and says that this card actually exists. Harvey notes that its value is incredible. Put it up for auction and you'll be rich enough to last 10 lifetimes. The manager notes that the most surprising thing here is something else. For some reason, Harvey doesn't want to sell it and just gives it away. A look of suspicion crosses his face, and he asks if the guy is really driven solely by fanaticism. Harvey points out that only the seller has the right to dispose of the goods and reminds them that they won't be able to use the card anyway. Without thinking twice, he adds that it is better to give it to someone you admire than to sell it to someone you don't even know. The manager looks at Harvey in surprise and asks why he can't use the ability himself. Harvey replies that he has awakened for the first time, and therefore such powerful abilities outside his specialization are not available to him. Stewart asks the manager how much free cash they have now, and hears that it is exactly 20 billion. Stewart asks Harvey if he only takes cash and adds that he has items available for exchange. Harvey asks again if this is about exchanging equipment or other material assets. After some time, they drive up to a huge mansion, which could be worth several tens of billions. Harvey asks Stewart if he's really willing to give up an entire building for one card. The manager explains that they have several buildings purchased for investment, and this is one of them. Harvey wonders how it happened that he came to own an entire building. Stewart takes a couple of steps towards him and calls his name to get his attention. A genuine smile appears on his face, and he asks if Harvey liked the gift. Harvey looks at his interlocutor in surprise and says that such a gift is simply impossible not to appreciate. Stewart extends his hand and says that this is what they agreed on, and Harvey hands him the skill card. Stewart decides not to delay and immediately masters Mountain Cleave, which brings incredible joy to the main character. His body immediately begins to glow with a strange, slightly bluish energy. Harvey watches this and realizes that the ability can now be copied with incredible ease. The system notifies Korea's best tank that the skill has been successfully mastered and offers to test it in a separate window. Harvey extends his hand to his comrade and says that he is now the only tank in all of Asia with this ability. He adds that Stewart's position in the rankings will likely rise by several notches. Stewart shakes the hand of a devoted fan and replies that crowds mean nothing to him. The mastery he has acquired is a far greater reward. He also congratulates Harvey on becoming the owner of the building at such a young age and asks about his plans for the future. Harvey replies that he has no serious plans yet and that he just wanted to work as a mercenary, as he intended from the very beginning. He clarifies that his priority is regular hunting in the beginner zone and only low-difficulty quests. Stewart reminds him that he now has a building and a lot of money, so there is no need to be a mercenary, but Harvey disagrees. He talks about how unpredictable the world is and how he has to raise his younger brother and sister. He also admits that after the losses of the Great Disaster, hard times came and his own youth turned into a nightmare. Looking at the huge building, he firmly declares that he does not want his brother and sister's future to become the same nightmare. He says he wants to give them a life without the constant lack of money, a life full of freedom and hope. Stewart is so impressed by this speech that he remains silent for a while. However, there is no trace of optimism on his face, and he notes that a life full of hope is practically impossible in our time. Harvey turns his head towards him in surprise and asks what he means. Stewart explains, the Great Disaster is only the beginning, and the world is slowly creeping towards destruction as sudden breakthroughs occur with increasing frequency. He adds that in addition to the increasing number of monsters, he now also has to deal with villains. Stewart says there has been a recent series of hunter murders in the Gangnam area, and the suspect is a known criminal. He confidently states the name, Robin, and Harvey notes that the name sounds familiar. Stewart talks about how hard it is to deal with monsters, and now with people. He adds that Harvey's brother and sister may not need buildings at all, but a peaceful sky, without monsters and without such people. Meanwhile, the action moves to an abandoned construction site late at night. One of the hunters asks when his interlocutor last contacted the association. Robin emerges from the shadows and notices that his victim is defending himself very carefully, but has no chance of escaping. The hunter asks what he is doing here, reminding him that he was hunting in a completely different place. Robin replies that no one has ever seen villains sitting in one place. They come and go as they please. The hunter understands that there will be no help and he has no chance of getting out of this trap. The villain asks the victim why her comrades were so ruthless that they abandoned the wounded commander without looking back. In a desperate attempt to get to the enemy, he rushes at him with a knife and orders him to shut up. Robin easily moves out of the way of the attack and grabs his victim by the neck. Pressing the hunter to himself, he stabs him briefly several times with a knife. He falls to the ground, realizing that he has no more strength left. Robin says that if the victim hadn't asked him for help, he would have stayed here longer and taken his time, but now he'll have to finish faster. Finally, he asks if he knows Harvey, reminding him that the man was in the news a few days ago. The fighter begins to scream loudly and unleash an incredible stream of curses on the killer. Robin replies that since his victim doesn't know anything, he should die quickly and not waste time. He also adds that he would have killed him in any case, even if he had received the answer he wanted. Immediately after this, he slowly gets up, feeling the blood running down his hoodie. Without thinking twice, he heads home and takes out his phone to check the news again. Seeing the big headlines, he realizes he hasn't had a real toy to play with in a long time. For some time, he ponders what steps to take to find this person. A few seconds pass and he gives the video a bloody like. Then he chooses a new target for himself, and Harvey will have to face very difficult times. Attacks of madness overwhelm this sick man, and he begins to laugh sincerely like a madman.